mother and stepfather arrived. She looked at me, and I looked back. The sneer that formed on her face reminded me too much of someone else I didn't care for. I said, "What's so funny?" she asked again. "Mackenzie, you really shouldn't be rude," her mother began as she walked in, then noticed me. "Oh, Terry." She stared at me for a few seconds, and her expression changed. Then her husband saw me, too. Before he could say anything, Mackenzie stepped in and showed me how much we had drifted apart. "Don't worry, Mom. Anything I say to him," she pointed at me, "won't be rude. I thought it was funny that he was laughing, so I wanted to know what was so amusing." I was shocked by her harsh words. Her stepfather laughed, clearly enjoying the situation and seeing my reaction. A few customers in the store looked at the teenager being rude and shook their heads. I was surprised to see that Carol looked embarrassed. I shook my head to collect myself. I sighed, looked at all three of them, and then at my former daughter. "What I'm laughing at is something you don't need to concern yourself with, Mackenzie." Even with my simple reply, both Mackenzie and her stepfather were ready to argue. He tensed up, like he was preparing to defend her. Thinking things might escalate, I changed my phone's app, hit record, and tucked it into my shirt pocket. The top of my phone showed a bit, with the camera pointing at them. I felt a little silly, but now I had proof, if needed. "What did you say?" Mackenzie repeated the insult. She had a smug smile, acting like she was teasing someone at school. I looked at her as if she were just a stranger being rude. "Mackenzie, when did you learn to be so disrespectful in public?" I shook my head, stood up from my seat, and faced her. "I don't get it. Why would you want others to dislike you?" I asked, motioning toward the other customers in the cafe. Then, as I looked right at her, her confidence seemed to fade a bit as she started to understand the point I was making. She glanced around nervously, noticing the people watching her. Some nodded along with what I had said. I stood with my hands on my hips and spoke firmly. "I asked you, young lady, when did it become okay to treat people poorly in public, no matter who they are or how you feel about them? I taught you better than that." Her confidence seemed to falter, but then the rude man jumped in. He puffed himself up, speaking as if he were more important than everyone else. "Mackenzie can call you what she wants because she's my daughter, not yours?" He sneered at me again. "And it's not disrespectful to call someone like you names no matter where we are." "Besides," he chuckled, "I thought since your wife and daughter left you for me, a better man," he bragged, tapping his chest. "You would stay away, so what are you doing back in my town?" He walked around the cafe like he owned the place. I felt anger building up inside me, trying hard to keep calm. I was strong and fit from years of working in construction. Now, in my new job as a quality manager at Delotees, Inc., I still did a lot of physical work. The rude guy was short and round. He worked as a surgeon and had a big ego, especially when it came to me. Maybe his confidence came from having an affair with Carol, my ex-wife. He had persuaded her to leave me and somehow got Mackenzie to stay with him, taking away everything I cared about. He might have thought he was better because he was a doctor and I was just a plumber. But in a fair fight, I knew I could easily defeat him. He just couldn't see it. By this point, several customers were tired of the argument and were leaving. I honestly thought I would do the same if I were in their shoes. The cafe staff stood there, unsure of where to look. Carol appeared a bit shy, but remained by the rude man's side, while Mackenzie seemed energized by her father's insults aimed at me. I sighed again, hoping a softer approach might help. "Not that it's your concern, but I came to visit my parents." The rude man laughed. "Yes. The so-called grandparents who didn't care enough to even acknowledge my daughter when we visited?" He wore a smug smile. clearly pleased with himself. I felt my face flush with anger, and I was on the verge of snapping back when the waitress at the counter called my name, looking a bit concerned about the rising tension. That small interruption gave me the chance to pull back and take a deep breath. I reminded myself to stay calm and disengage from the irritating trio. I walked to the counter, picked up my order, and mouthed sorry to the uneasy waitress. She gave me a slight smile, grateful for the reassurance. "All right, I'm leaving," I announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, but mainly for the recording in my pocket. Without another word, I walked past the group and out the door, hoping the whole ordeal was behind me. I thought I could just move on and write it off as a chance encounter gone wrong. But, of course, he couldn't let it go. A few steps away from the cafe, I heard his voice behind me. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" he called after me. "I'm not done with you yet, and you're not going anywhere until I say so." He trailed after me, clearly not willing to let it rest. "You're in my town now, and you'll do what I say," he went on, referring to the support I had from people who had caused him trouble in the past. I turned, tilting my head slightly, realizing he was completely out of touch. He held Carol's hand with Mackenzie following close behind, her arms folded in a typical defiant stance. Reluctantly, I tried once more to defuse the situation, mostly for the recording. "Listen, Stephen, I don't want any trouble. You won, okay? My wife and daughter." I glanced at them briefly, then back at him. "They chose you over me. I lost, and right now I just want to be as far away from this as possible." I looked at Mackenzie, feeling a familiar ache in my chest at what I had lost. "In such a short time, you've taken someone who meant the world to me and changed her," I said, my voice heavy with disappointment. Mackenzie's stance softened, and she seemed affected, as did her mother inside the cafe. She wondered why her friends only wanted to talk when they needed something and why they ignored her when she wanted to connect, as if it didn't matter to them. Dr. Dickhead chuckled. "You really have no clue," he said. "My daughter can choose any boy she wants whenever she likes. She has more friends than she can count since she isn't with you anymore. She's not selfish. She's confident." He leaned in closer and whispered, "That's because of me." I shook my head. This man didn't understand what being a father truly meant. He believed that being a dad was about his image, and that his presence would make everything better for her. I feared that he might react poorly towards Carol or Mackenzie if things didn't go his way. Unfortunately, his words seemed to boost both Mackenzie and Carol's confidence. When Carol heard the word privilege, her previous discomfort faded away. She looked me up and down, from my simple shorts and t-shirt to my old truck, and shook her head. "You talk about behavior, but maybe you should focus on how you present yourself. Look at you, Terry. Not long after our divorce, and you dress like you don't care. And that old truck? I wouldn't be surprised if you don't even have a job and moved back in with your parents after wasting all your divorce money." I sighed deeply. They had no idea. Dr. Dickhead grinned, thinking Carol had it right about me. "Looks like you're such a loser that you've run out of money," he said cheerfully. "I hope you didn't touch my daughter's college fund." He acted as if he were being serious. "I can only imagine how embarrassed your parents must be to have such a son." "No wonder my daughters left you," I growled. "My parents aren't involved in this, and that money isn't yours or hers. What I do with it is none of your business," I said firmly, yet quietly, hoping they would notice my increasing frustration. "Like it doesn't concern us? You should have just handed it over when you were supposed to and then gone away," he snapped. He sniffed as if he were joking. I can bet it smelled just as bad around you as you do." He tried to act noble while spreading his hands in a fake gesture of kindness. "I helped some women who were in a tough spot and pulled them out of the mud of your life. I gave them new hope." He dropped his hands and shot me a furious glare, trying to scare me. "And that money wasn't yours. It was my daughter's, you jerk. You were supposed to give it to us," he sneered. Then he smirked. "But don't worry, I will get it in court." He was pleased with his attempt to sue me for the savings I set aside over the years for Mackenzie's education. Luckily, the courts ruled in our favor since it was clear I was the only one contributing to her account. I gripped the bag of breakfast wraps tightly and balanced the coffee tray I was holding. My frustration grew. This man was just a lazy fool, and I suspected he was trying to provoke me. He looked even heavier than when I last saw him almost a year ago at the hospital. I counted to 10, breathing deeply and keeping my eyes on him. Carol turned pale again. She had seen me angry before, and while I wasn't a fighter, she knew I could handle myself if needed. She touched her husband's arm to calm him. "Stephen, honey, let's not bother him. He's already feeling bad about losing Mackenzie and me." Maybe she thought her words would calm him, but they seemed to encourage him instead. He laughed mockingly. "Yeah, he lost. I won. But listen, if I ever need help, I'll call you. But if you don't give me that money, don't come to my hospital. I'll make sure you get the wrong treatment." I was taken aback. He had just threatened me. "Did you just threaten me?" I wanted to hit him, but I had to stay calm for the recording. Mackenzie jumped in, adding to the tension. "Which one's smart?" "My dad doesn't make empty threats. If he says to avoid your hospital, it's a serious warning," she replied fiercely. "He's right," he said, nodding like he was wise. He didn't seem to understand the problem with what he just admitted. Even without the recording, just the claim that he threatened someone in a hospital would be a scandal for him. But he kept talking. "That's a promise. No one will know if I give you the wrong treatment. Without your wealthy friends protecting you, no one will question me." He stepped closer, clenching his fist. "You had the nerve, along with your sister, to threaten me in my own place, my hospital. You made it so I was put on probation for 2 long years without extra pay, but I still have to work all the same hours, so you owe me, and I'm going to make sure you pay for it. This isn't a threat. It's a promise." He opened his arms wide. "You're in big trouble because I run things around here. You're just a plumber that no one cares about. If they did, my friends here wouldn't be with me, right?" He lowered his arms and started to walk away, but quickly turned back and swung his arm, knocking my coffee tray backward and spilling hot coffee all over me. He smirked and then turned, saying, "Come on, girls, let's leave the plumber in the dirt where he belongs." Mackenzie followed him, but Carol came right over as I knelt down to gather the spilled cups. They were nearly empty, but I couldn't just leave them on the ground. She put her hands on her hips and looked at me with a gaze that could almost melt ice. "You just couldn't let it go. Could you, Terry?" she said with frustration in her voice. I stood up, coffee dripping from me, and faced my ex-wife. "Let what go, Carol?" "Us. Him." She waved her arms around. "You just had to bother Stephen, didn't you? Just understand this, Mackenzie and I are his now, not yours." I put my phone from my front pocket into my shorts pocket. I sighed. A habit I had picked up this morning. "Carol, maybe you didn't see the same conversation I did. I tried to walk away several times. I never insulted you, Mackenzie, or your partner." I looked at her and noted for the recording. I didn't threaten him or raise my fists at him like he did to me. I hoped my phone was still recording the conversation. She shook her head. "It doesn't change anything. I chose him over you. So, just your being here bothers him because he thinks I would leave him for you." I laughed at her. My presence bothered him? You'd choose someone so self-centered over me? I gave her a disbelieving smile and shook my head. Tell your partner he has nothing to worry about. I would never want a dishonest person like you back in my life. She stepped back, surprised. You really think I would ever take you back? No way. Someone who threw me away like I was nothing after all those years together. You think I could ever take someone back who disrespected me like that? I shook my head and waved her off. Just go away, Carol. You make me sick. She stood there, unsure of what to say next. Maybe she thought I would forgive her foolishness. I was fairly certain I would never be able to. Perhaps someday, far in the future, I might not be so upset about it, but true forgiveness felt unlikely. If you think I came back for you, you're mistaken. I only returned because of Mom's. I started speaking without thinking, then stopped, almost revealing my mom's illness. I glanced at Carol and she caught that last part. She looked at me with a confused expression, softer than before. Because of Mom's what, Terry? Despite everything, I do care, she tried to say. When all the signs have shown me the opposite? I gave her a questioning look. I shrugged my shoulders. It doesn't matter anymore, Carol. You made your choice, and now you and your daughter have to deal with it. But I must warn you, today your husband crossed a line. You didn't say a word when those others made nasty comments and threatened me. You even joined in when it was about your money. Remember when I said, if you push me too far, you won't like what happens? Carol nodded. Her eyes widened a bit as she recalled our last conversation. You pushed. Carol turned a bit red, and without saying anything else, I walked over to my truck to grab a towel from the back. As I opened the truck door, Dr. Dickhead called for Carol, and she quickly went back to him. By the time I had wiped myself down, they had left. The cafe at Maitland Central was very apologetic when I went back inside. They replaced my coffee for free, even though I insisted on paying. They told me that the Morrisons had been visiting for a few months. At first they were friendly, but then they became rude and bothered several customers. I thanked them for the free coffees and their kindness before heading back to my parents' house. It took me another 45 minutes to pick up the new coffees and get home. When I arrived, my mom was awake. Kim and Paul were there too. Kim was starting to show her pregnancy, a small baby bump, but it hadn't slowed down her energy. What happened to you, Terry? Kim asked, noticing the coffee stains on my clothes. I unexpectedly ran into Carol Mackenzie and Dr. Dickhead, I replied, using my nickname for him. Oh, they did this to you? Mom asked, looking at the coffee mess covering me. Yeah, well, Dr. Dickhead was the one responsible. But Mackenzie really let me have it. She's not. The little girl, I remember it all, I said with a frown. I thought I had cried all I could for them, but new tears filled my eyes as I remembered the sneer and disrespect she showed me. My heart ached to see her, to hold her, and to return to the way we used to be, even though I knew that wouldn't happen. Mom came over and gave me a big hug, and then she handed me a tissue, like all moms seem to have on hand. I paused to thank her. I then gave Mom her half-strength latte, Dad his long black coffee, and each of them a warm breakfast wrap. I took a sip of my own coffee and sat down on a kitchen chair, trying not to stain the kitchen with my messy clothes. It's okay, son. One day, Mackenzie will realize what she has lost, my dad said, trying to comfort me. Will she, Dad? I replied. The way she spoke to me today makes me think differently. She will, son. She will, he assured me with a nod. Just then, my phone rang. It was still covered in coffee, so I answered on speaker. Hey there, our dear friend. Your girls are missing you. We need you back here to keep us warm at night. But enough about that. How's your morning? You didn't call us back, Harmony exclaimed. I felt heat rise to my cheeks as everyone at the table turned to look at me and then began to laugh. "Hey, girls, it's Kim. Your friend is turning bright red right now, but it's nice to know my little brother can still handle things," Kim joked. This made everyone laugh even more, including me. I finally spoke up. "Sorry, everyone, it's a long and not very nice story, but can I call you back in 5? I need to clean my phone. It's covered in coffee from a spill." "Sure, take your time," Melody said, giggling at my clear embarrassment. "Call us back soon." Then they hung up. Everyone turned to me. "So," Paul said, looking at me, "you and Melody in harmony? That's not just our imagination?" "Nope, I'm dating both of them," I said with a grin toward my brother-in-law. Kim chuckled. "And you're really close with them, I assume?" I smiled at Paul and Kim, then gave a cautious glance at Mom and Dad, who were watching me closely. They had been there when the girls came to my room, but I figured they might judge me for moving from just sleeping next to them to being in a relationship with two women, especially twins. We were all surprised when Mom spoke up for me. "Kim, let's cut him some slack. If he is in a relationship with those two lovely girls," she emphasized, lovely, "I believe my son treats them with respect." "I really care about them, everyone," I said with a shrug. "What I have with both of them is different from what I had with Carol. It's something I can't describe. It just feels right. It started that first night I helped them. At first I felt grateful, but now I just want to spend time with them. Who knows what will happen in a few years? I hope things keep getting better." "So," Paul said, smiling. "Oh, come on, Paul. He's dating both of them, isn't he, little brother?" "Yes, I'm with both of them," I said. "And?" He pressed, eager for more details. I chuckled. "Yes, being with two beautiful red-headed twins who care about me as much as I care about them is amazing." Paul laughed at my honest reply. Kim playfully hit Paul on the back of the head. I took the chance to clean my phone and call the girls. When I stood up, Paul offered a fist bump. I laughed and bumped it back. "My man," he said, and I grabbed a cloth to clean my phone. The call with the girls went great. I was outside on my parents' deck for about half an hour, enjoying my coffee and sharing everything that had happened. They asked a lot of surprised questions when I told them about my issues with some mean kids earlier that day. They were shocked that anyone could be so rude, especially a child I had helped raise. "You know, Terry, if our kids ever talk like that to someone, I'm going to take action and teach them a lesson," Melody said when I finished my story. Harmony and I laughed, and I could hear them moving around in the bathroom as Harmony prepared for her shift at work. "Wait, our kids?" I asked, and there was silence. Then I heard them both giggle. "Yep. Someday, you're going to have kids with both of us. We're going to be your partners in parenting. We won't let anyone hurt you again." I was surprised that they wanted kids with me. "You both want to have kids with me." When I said this, their laughter faded, and Harmony spoke up. "Of course, our love," she said, using the special name they both called me. "You are our guy, and we want to have a family with you." She paused for a moment. "But not just yet, and only when all of us agree." I could hear a bit of concern in her voice. "Terry, are you okay with having kids someday?" I thought for a moment. "No, girls. I'm not against having kids with you. I'm sorry if I worried you, but honestly, I'm not sure about kids right now. I'm 34, and after my daughter treated me poorly today, I guess I'm just not ready yet." "It's okay, baby," Melody said softly. "We get it. We shouldn't have brought this up after a tough encounter with Mackenzie. I wish I could have been there to support you. I would have jumped on them and demanded answers." I laughed, imagining Melody taking on my former family. Thanks, love. I do have a video of most of it. A thought popped into my head. Wait, I have a video, I said with excitement. What do you mean, Terry? Harmony asked. Dr. Dickhead threatened me and I thought there could be trouble, so I recorded the encounter on my phone in my pocket. I'm not sure if it could be used in court, but... Go talk to Kim and let us know, Terry, Melody said. And call us back. I need to leave for work in about an hour, Harmony added. Okay, my loves. I will. I love you both. Love you too, they both said at the same time, and we hung up. I walked back inside, feeling thrilled. I have it on tape, I announced. Ew. I don't want to see anything private between you and your girlfriends, Kim said jokingly. Then she added quickly, and Paul, if you want to have another child with me, don't say what you were about to. Both Paul and I shared a smile. I turned to Kim. No, not that. Well, not this time. I winked at Paul and he laughed. I have a recording of my meeting with Dr. Dickhead earlier. What? How? Kim asked. Mom, Dad, and Paul also looked at me with curious eyes. I knew there would be trouble, so I hit record and tucked my phone in my pocket. It's possible I captured the whole argument, including Dr. Morrison threatening me. We gathered around my phone's screen to watch the video. It was shaky, but we could tell who was who. The sound was a bit unclear in places since the phone rubbed against my pocket, but most of the conversation came through well enough. Except for the end with Carol, when I moved my phone into my shorts pocket. You could still catch some of it if you listened closely. Wow, Kim said, as we finished watching. Just wow. She leaned back, deep in thought. Is Carol's new husband in as much trouble as I think? Dad asked. Kim smiled widely. Oh yes, he's in big trouble. And because it was in a public place, there's no law against filming him. She paused, thinking. There could be some issues with consent since a minor, Mackenzie, is involved. He'll make some calls and find out more. She continued, her eyes bright. The threat he made to you about going to the hospital alone could cost him his medical license if it gets out. But to say he would make sure you never left the hospital, he could face serious consequences. What about Mackenzie? I asked, concern in my voice. I might want her out of my life for what she had done. But that didn't mean I didn't care about her or want to see her in trouble. I don't know, Terry. Mackenzie could be in serious trouble over this. She might be too young to know better. Still, what she said about turning a threat into a promise is concerning. I nodded. I need to think. I can tell this situation is a mess, but she was once my daughter, and she was your niece too. I know, brother. But she made her choices, just like you told Carol, Kim replied. We talked for a few more minutes about what had happened. Then I excused myself to call my girlfriends before Harmony had to go to work. I updated them and told them I would send the video tomorrow morning so we could watch it together on the phone. For the rest of the day, we focused on Mom. She was recovering from her first cancer treatment and felt quite tired. Paul and I helped around the house, cleaning the yard and doing some chores that Dad had no time for while he looked after Mom and worked during the week. In the afternoon, we shared old stories from when Kim and I were kids. Mom laughed at our familiar tales, recalling the fun we had a few months ago, but she didn't mind. We were family. When I went to bed, I called Melody while Harmony was working. We chatted for about an hour about everyday things. Tomorrow was Sunday, and I planned to go to church with Mom and Dad. After that, we would enjoy a family fish and chips lunch and spend some more time together. Then I would drive home early Monday morning, getting ready for work on Tuesday. Sunday church was nice. I caught up with a few people I hadn't seen in a while and received a few kind words about what happened with Carol and Mackenzie. I felt a bit guilty sitting in church at times, thinking about being involved with both Melody and Harmony. But nothing bad happened. and I left the church without any trouble. I decided I would talk to someone about what God might really think about me being with both Melody and Harmony. At lunchtime, I was reminded how delicious the local fish and chip shop was while sitting with Mom, Dad, Paul, and Kim. I loved the calamari. It was freshly made and melted in my mouth. I was happy to finish the last piece when a knock came at the front door. We weren't expecting anyone, and I felt nervous when I saw who it was. Standing outside was my former family. Carol was there with Mackenzie. Carol looked upset and a little worried, while Mackenzie seemed frustrated. I was relieved that Dr. Dickhead wasn't with them. After a moment of silence where everyone just stared, Dad opened the door. As soon as the door opened, Dad asked, "What do you want, Carol?" I thought after how you treated Terry yesterday, this would be the last place you would want to come. Dad's tone was firm but polite. "I know, John." Carol started wringing her hands. "But Terry said something yesterday and I saw something in his eyes. I don't want you all to think I don't care, but—" Dad cut her off. "Carol, excuse me, but I honestly think you don't care. The way you both treated Terry was awful. I have never seen such disrespect towards someone you once claimed to care about." "I never said that," Carol began, but Dad interrupted again. "You didn't need to say anything, Carol. Terry has the whole thing on video. We saw what you, Mackenzie, and your new husband did. Frankly, I am ashamed that we ever called you family." "But, John, Terry said something is wrong, and he wouldn't tell me what. So we thought we would come and try to fix things." Carol wanted to seem sincere, but Dad wasn't convinced. "It's a bit too late to show any kindness, don't you think?" Dad shook his head. "No, Carol, there is nothing you can do to help. And honestly, we won't tell you what is going on. You have not been family for some time. And while that saddens me, this is a family matter, and it's not for outsiders. You need to understand that you and your daughter are now outsiders. Both of you have embarrassed yourselves and hurt this family in ways I don't think you understand." He looked down at them. "And let's not forget how the customers in the cafe left in disgust at your language and disrespect toward my son yesterday." I watched from my spot on the couch during this whole conversation. I glanced at Mackenzie. She wouldn't look at me for long, but kept glancing back as Dad and Carol spoke. I kept my face neutral, even though I felt a mix of anger and sadness. The talk between my ex-wife and my father was nearly over. And Carol, "Yes, John," she replied, her voice a bit shaky. "Terry was right about one thing. Neither of you seems to realize that what you are doing and how people see it will not end well. As far as this family goes, you've burned your bridge with us. You're on your own now, and Mackenzie's issues are entirely your responsibility." "What do you mean?" She looked shocked. I think at that moment she realized that pushing me away also meant losing my family. "Your daughter—" Mackenzie darted a glance at the man she used to call Pa. "Mackenzie is not on a good path. If you don't help her change this selfishness and disrespect that your husband is encouraging, she is going to be very lonely as she grows up," Mackenzie protested. "That's not fair, Pa." "It is fair, Mackenzie. I saw the video. I saw how you treated the man who raised you. I watched your actions, and I feel disgusted." He spoke sharply. "All my son ever did was love you, both of you. Those fancy clothes and bright things will not bring you real happiness. You are giving away your true self for things that won't make you happy." Carol looked down, embarrassment in her eyes once more. Mackenzie glanced past her grandfather to me and tried to regain her poise. "Yes, but these—" She pointed to her clothes, a bit of her earlier arrogance returning. Are things that someone like a plumber could never provide? She stood a little taller, looking at me. My new father takes me places, gives me gifts, and doesn't need to work hard like that. The sneer I had seen before came back on her face. Dad was visibly upset. Mackenzie, let me remind you what I do for a living. I work hard, too. So does that mean you think less of me? Am I as bad as the man you are looking down on, who only wanted to love you? Her expression changed, realization washing over her. Of course not, Dad. You're a good plumber. She tried to recover, not expecting that her comments would lead to tension. So tell me, Mackenzie, if I'm a good plumber and my son, who you once loved and called Dad, is a bad plumber, what's the difference between us? My father asked. His neck reddened slightly, and I could feel the frustration he was trying to hold back. Mackenzie looked confused, and Carol interrupted, not understanding the situation and shifting blame. Enough, John. Don't upset the girl. We all know this is Terry's fault. He ran away when he should have stayed and fixed things with us. He could have been here. Dad shook his head. This is not my son's fault. And I'm tired of hearing that from you. It's time to grow up, Carol. Everyone was shocked. You think Terry should have stayed and been reminded every day of how both of you hurt him? To have you throw it in his face, that you pushed him aside so he could feel bad every time you saw him? He leaned a little closer. Or how you tried to get money from him. Money he saved, which you demanded. Even after treating him like this, he deserves some respect. He worked very hard every day for you. Mackenzie jumped in, and her words stung. But he could have seen me. I wanted him to see me. It doesn't matter to me that Stephen is a better father. I would never have cut Dad out of my life completely. Mom said it would only be until I was adopted. Then, Dad could have seen me again. Mackenzie sounded desperate, as if she had practiced this. But there was a crack in her shield, and it showed for the first time since the day at the coffee shop. It was also the first time I heard her call me Dad. I almost broke down and ran to her, but my own sadness held me back. I had promised that I would remember them, and I still did. Dad was tense, like a storm cloud ready to burst. Both Carol and Mackenzie stepped back. Do you really think that man is a better father? What are you thinking? He's no father! He clenched his fists like I did the day before, then took a deep breath to calm himself. You are almost 16. It's been over a year since you left. No, don't give me that look. You left your father. The only time you reached out was when you wanted something. And just now, not even a minute ago, I heard you disrespect him again. You called him a terrible father. Both of you keep talking about this new husband of your mother's. But did either of you? He looked at both of them. Ever think to see if Terry was okay? He paused for a moment. You had your new family. Who was there for Terry? He had you, Pa? He had Ma, Uncle Paul, and Aunt Kim? Mackenzie replied. Dad nodded slowly. Yeah, you're right. He did. And we saw him often. But those were just a few nights a week. A lot of the time he was alone with no family around. Not once. Not even once. Did you think about how he felt? You only thought about yourselves. Everyone paused, surprised by Dad's words. He rarely raised his voice or used strong language, even at work. The fact that he did now showed just how upset he was. We could sense he was close to losing control, and it made Carol and Mackenzie look uneasy. His voice softened again. My son left because you thought only of yourselves. You saw something you thought was better money. And I regret to say, both of you went after it, leaving love behind. By leaving him, you also left us, he said sharply. I stood up and moved closer, placing a hand on Dad's shoulder. I needed to stop this before it went too far. It's okay, Dad, You go back inside. I'll walk Carol and Mackenzie to their car." He turned to look at me, and for the first time I noticed tears in his eyes. He nodded, patted my hand on his shoulder, and then went back inside. I signaling to Carol and Mackenzie, and they walked ahead of me, looking smaller than before. When we got to Carol's car, a shiny new Lexus that caught my eye, they turned to me. "Ladies," I said calmly, before they could say anything, "I do not know what you hope to achieve by coming here today, but after what happened yesterday, you should have known it wouldn't end well." "Terry," Carol began, "we just thought—" "No, Carol," I interrupted. "You didn't think. This is my family now, not yours. If you want, go talk to your parents or to him." They all knew I meant the other man. "But Terry, Stephen's parents no longer around. And you know my parents live in England. Surely you don't want your daughter to lose her grandparents." Her voice, starting gently, grew sharper as she continued. "Mackenzie feels awful about everything," she went on. "When you keep her from seeing you, when you turn her grandparents against her, when you deny her access to her money." I raised my hand. Carol stopped. She knew that gesture meant I was serious. I had only done that a few times, even when we were married. But she listened. I kept my voice calm. "There you go again, shifting the blame away from yourself and not taking responsibility for your choices." I turned to my former daughter. "Mackenzie?" "Yes, Daddy?" There was a slight shake in her voice. "What is your name?" "Mackenzie, Dad. You know that." "No. What is your full name?" "Mackenzie Rossi Oth." She hesitated and then said, "Morrison." She looked down. I nodded. "Morrison," I repeated. I faced Carol. "Do you see that her last name is Morrison, not other? Have you both really not understood how you have hurt me?" "Daddy, I never—" Mackenzie started to speak, but Carol stopped her. "Yes, Terry, we knew. We knew what we were doing would hurt you, but we thought you'd get over it. Mackenzie just wanted her father. Do you know that she cried for you every night in the first month?" Carol seemed to want to make me look bad, and that frustrated me. "No, Carol, I didn't know that. But you know exactly why I didn't know." She looked down, knowing what I would say next. "The restraining order," I snapped, letting a bit of anger slip into my voice. "That restraining order. I couldn't talk to my daughter. I couldn't ask how her day was. I couldn't hug her, give her advice, or even be in the same room with her. And don't even get me started on how I was forgotten on my birthday. I was heartbroken, but I bet neither of you even thought about it. I couldn't do anything. And as I told you before, the way both of you acted was planned and cold, meant to hurt me deeply. I was getting angry, but I kept my voice low. And that pain was encouraged by the new man in your life. I told you last time that both of you broke my heart. To this day, it still hurts. The only way I found to cope was to move away from the hurt you caused me. I am still sad about both of you, and even now, talking to you makes me feel such pain that I think I might break if I let my feelings show. Both women had tears in their eyes, but I didn't stop. Instead, I took a breath and spoke softly. What hurts me the most is that the day you both left me was the day my family fell apart. On the morning you left, you acted like everything was fine. Did you know why I didn't see what you were planning? They looked at me shyly and shook their heads, showing they didn't know. Love. I paused for a moment. I loved both of you completely. I trusted you both with my life, believing that if I loved you, you would do the same for me. But, Daddy, I still love you, Mackenzie said suddenly. I turned my attention to her. Mackenzie, your idea of love has changed in a way that worries me. Today you say you love me, but yesterday was very different. do you remember what you all called me when you tried to hurt me? Mackenzie looked down at her feet and stayed quiet. Mackenzie, do you remember what you were calling me? I asked again with firmness. After a moment, she nodded her head slightly. Yes, she whispered. What was it? What were you calling me instead of Dad? I asked. She lifted her eyes to meet mine briefly, then looked back down. There seemed to be something interesting on the ground for both of them. Asshole, she said quietly, sounding a little ashamed. I nodded. You called me an asshole, yet now you're calling me Dad and saying you love me. Do you see why I'm confused? You say you love me today, but yesterday you shouted names at me and even threatened me. You hinted that it was okay for bad things to happen to me. My voice was still low, but filled with emotion. But Daddy, it was... She stopped. It was... She couldn't finish her thought. It wasn't kind, Carol added for her daughter with a sigh. But Terry, what do you want? You can't just cut off seeing your daughter. I shot a look at my ex-wife. Carol, you're just as guilty, right now. You feel bad, but yesterday you encouraged your daughter just like that man you now call your husband. As I said, I feel like I am mourning you both, as if you are gone. Mackenzie gasped, remembering my words. Everything you both have done has hurt me so much, and neither of you has ever shown real regret. I paused and looked at them. When they didn't reply, I asked Mackenzie, what happens the next time I see you? Will I be the bad guy again, or will I be your dad? You'll be Dad, Mackenzie said, tears running down her face. I wasn't sure if I felt this way because of how she treated me, or because she was facing consequences. It's hard to trust someone when your feelings are all mixed up. Mackenzie said, I'm sorry, Dad. I shouldn't have said those things, but I promise I'll do better next time. I nodded slowly. We'll see, Mackenzie. Trust takes time to rebuild. I will say that I still care about you, but it feels buried under a lot of hurt and anger. What happened yesterday, the words you used and how you acted made it really hard for me to forgive. It won't take much more for those feelings to disappear completely. Mackenzie was crying, so I turned to my ex-wife. What about you, Carol? What do you mean? What will happen next time? She looked at me for a moment and sighed. Terry, I never imagined things would turn out like this, but I don't know. Maybe we can sit down and talk soon. It's all a mess. I'm sorry, Carol, but there won't be a meeting. I'm starting my new life tomorrow morning. They looked at me, surprised. No, I won't share details, but I finally have a chance to be happy. And I'm going to take it. Do you have a new girlfriend, Dad? Mackenzie asked, her eyes still red from crying. You don't need to know that, Mackenzie. Just like you don't need to know about my work, which is why you came here today, I said, looking at Carol. That's what brought you here, right? Or was it just about money? Both of them looked away shyly, and I chuckled softly. I thought so. Ladies, I think this conversation should end here. If we keep talking, it will likely lead to money matters, and I don't think that will be good for any of us. So, let's part ways now before it gets worse. Carol sighed. Okay, Terry, but we still need to talk. She looked at me with expectation, but her tone had changed to something more serious. I know, Carol, but like I said yesterday, pushing me won't end well for you if you keep this up. Consider this a friendly warning. Carol's expression toughened. She wasn't getting the reaction she wanted. You know that Stephen might cause you a lot of problems. You could end up with nothing. In trying to help you keep some dignity before it's too late. It's better to agree to what we ask for now than end up lost and wishing you had taken our offer. I laughed aloud at her sudden switch in mood. How did I not notice this before? Mackenzie looked a little scared. She seemed sorry enough as she tried to apologize. But now, she was stuck between me and her mother. Carol was staring at me, wondering why I ignored her threat and even laughed at her. I turned to Carol and said, "You who once held a special place in my heart, betrayed my trust." Each word seemed to take a toll on her, pale as I spoke. I don't say these things just to hurt you. I say them so you can understand how I truly feel about what I'm about to say. Carol glanced at me with fear in her eyes. Mackenzie stood frozen, barely able to breathe. I am not the same person you left behind. I have faced pain, both physical and emotional, that you cannot imagine. But the worst part is that the three of you keep pushing me. I raised my voice. I want you to know that none of you understand what I am capable of. You make fun of me, claiming you have dignity. Your threats are meaningless and show how shallow you have become. You think you can ruin me? You have no idea what might happen if you don't back off. I leaned closer to Carol. So tell your husband to be satisfied with his victory over you and Mackenzie. I looked at Mackenzie, who seemed to shrink into herself. I wouldn't help any of you if you were in trouble right now. I glanced back at Carol, my feelings clear in my eyes. This is the last time I will take your threats lightly or accept any rude comments without a response. I took a deep breath and calmed myself, trying to show a friendlier side. So now, I won't say goodbye in a nice way, but I also won't wish you ill. I stepped back to signal that the conversation was over. They looked at me for a moment, but Carol finally understood I wasn't going to say anything more. She took Mackenzie's hand and led her to the car, then got in and started the engine. Mackenzie rolled down the window, tears in her eyes. "Daddy, I'm sorry." My heart broke again. Despite everything, I could still feel love for her in my heart. I nodded, trying to hide my feelings. "I really want to believe you are sorry, Mackenzie. Show me through your actions that you're truly sorry, and don't let me see you behave like you did yesterday again, okay?" "I'll try." Not quite the strong commitment I was hoping for. "Don't just try. Make it happen, Mackenzie. Goodbye." I walked back up to the house as they drove away. As I reached the porch and watched them leave, I felt my mother's arms wrap around me from behind. "Are you okay?" she asked. I paused for a moment. That was both harder and easier than I thought it would be. But at least we didn't yell at each other. It was close, though, I thought, as my mom let go of me and pulled me back into the living room, where we all sat down again. "So, what do we do now?" my mom asked. After what Carol had said, I explained the conversation I had with Carol and Mackenzie to my family. Kim, taking it all in, was all focused and serious. She sat there with a glass of red wine, thinking deeply. She wasn't drinking it, just holding it. It was her way of coping since she was pregnant. I figured Paul would finish it for her later. "Well," she said finally, "I think we should prepare to take action regarding the threat made against Terry by Dr. Dickhead. No matter what he did yesterday is a major professional mistake. The other comments and what Carol said to you don't hold any real weight legally. You also have to think about how any action could really change how you feel about Carol or Mackenzie." I looked at my family. There's no love left for Carol in me. She's destroyed any chance of us having a civil conversation again. But Mackenzie, I'm not sure. My family sensed my inner conflict. Even though I was hurt by what my former daughter had done, I still felt some love for her. My mom squeezed my hand. "It's okay, Terry. We know this is tough. I still care about Mackenzie despite everything." I nodded, appreciating the support. I looked back at Kim. I think we should move forward with something against Dr. Dickhead. How long will it take to prepare the action you're talking about? I asked my sister. A few weeks, maybe a month. I need to review the video to ensure we have a strong case against him. If we do this right, he could face serious consequences. Well, I really don't need more money. I have a good job, and I'm sure my girlfriends are well off. We all chuckled, knowing the Delotes family was wealthy. I looked at my family. But aside from that, I want to stand on my own. We others took pride in ourselves and dealt with our own issues. I told my family how much I loved my girls, but I knew I had to face my own battles. Everyone agreed, and Kim turned to Dad. Dad, I know you meant well, but I wish you hadn't brought up the video. Sorry, he said, and Kim gently touched his hand. Oh, and Dad, Kim said with a smile. Dad looked at her curiously. I'm not sure where you got that language from with Carol earlier, but really, she said, shaking her finger. Everyone laughed. The rest of the afternoon was filled with family talk. We discussed Mom's cancer treatment, my relationships with the girls, Kim's pregnancy, and what to do about Carol and Mackenzie. Later that day, I received a text from an unknown number. I'm going to ruin everything you care about. You're in big trouble. I recognized the tone. It likely came from Dr. Dickhead. I wanted to reply, but instead showed it to Kim. She laughed and took a photo of the message, noting the number, time, and date for evidence. We spent a few more minutes discussing why he felt so threatened. Everyone knew I would never go after Carol again. Kim and I joked that maybe he felt insecure in his personal life, suggesting that he might not measure up. I later called my girls and updated them about my talk with Carol and Mackenzie. They were still upset on my behalf, but glad there hadn't been a scene this time. When I told them about the text, they giggled, agreeing that he must not be very confident. And you have 2 girlfriends to keep happy? We know you do a great job, Harmony said with a laugh, making us all smile. We chatted and laughed a bit longer. I felt warm knowing I had their love. I told them I would be driving home early the next day and would be back by the afternoon before wishing them good night and heading to bed. The drive home was easy, and I was happy to think of Bathurst as home. It really felt like home because that's where Melody and Harmony were. Everything else was just extra. That evening, our gathering was great, and I made sure the girls had a good time. They even walked a bit funny the next day. At work, just after lunch, I was sitting down with some reports when Sally came into my office and sat down. So? She asked. So? I replied, raising an eyebrow. Is it true? She continued. Is what true? I responded. I suspected this was not about work. Over the last few months, Sally and I had become good friends, sharing laughs and jokes. That you're dating Melody and Harmony at the same time, and that you're the reason Melody seems a bit off today but has a big smile? Sally was smiling at me. And what if it is? I asked, trying to keep my face neutral and even act a little upset. Her smile faded. Oh, sorry, Terry, I didn't mean... I chuckled. Look, Sally, it will come out eventually, yes. I am dating both twins. And about walking funny, let's just say I was away for a few days and Harmony seems to be walking the same way Melody is today. Sally's eyes widened in surprise. Really? Really? I laughed. Wow, I never imagined. Oh, no, sorry, Terry, she stammered, realizing what she had said. I laughed again. It's fine, Sally, it's only been a few months, but I think the bond between us started from the beginning. Honestly, if you had told me a year ago that I would be dating identical twins, I would have thought you were joking. We chatted for a little longer when Melody peeked her head in, having heard our laughter. What are you talking about? She asked, smiling. You. I smiled back. Really, what's up? Well, Sally said playfully, Terry here is going to talk to my boyfriend and tell him how to make me as happy as you and Harmony are today. She giggled as Melody blushed. Then I noticed a spark in Melody's eyes. That's easy, Sally. Just make sure he cares for you so much that you want to be with him all night. Sally nearly spit out her drink, looking surprised. Is that like twice each? She joked. Not quite. Terry here was with me 4 times and Harmony 3 times. He really cares about both of us. Sally looked me over with curiosity. Dang, Terry, I wouldn't have guessed. I felt myself blush a bit, but laughed again. Nor would I, Sally. I never had this kind of energy before. I think it's something the girls are doing. It felt nice knowing that Sally and most of the team at Delotes Inc. didn't judge me for dating both daughters of the owner. Instead, many of the guys gave me a playful, you lucky guy look. Our talk with Sally must have spread because the girls in the office stared at me like I was something special at the fair. There was also a change in how everyone treated Melody at work. She had always been William's daughter, but now she was my girlfriend. In the office, we stayed professional. We might share a quick kiss now and then. Still, everyone knew and mostly respected my relationship with Melody and Harmony. The same thing happened when Harmony came to the office. The first time I was with both girls in the lunchroom, many people looked our way. But then Sally joined us, and it soon became normal that I was dating 2 girls. It helped that I was doing well in my job as quality manager. I studied hard and worked with my team to make small improvements to our processes, keeping our quality high and becoming more efficient. For more than 3 months, my life felt perfect. I had a great job and 2 caring girlfriends who were there for me most nights. I was deeply in love with both Melody and Harmony and couldn't imagine my future without them. Most people in the office and even around town, where we often ate and spent time together, got used to seeing the 3 of us together. Sometimes an older woman would say something harsh, but we never let it bother us. One time I bought a coffee for an older lady who was being rude to us, and it changed her attitude. Later, she sat with us and apologized for her earlier comments. She even shared some amusing stories about her youth and dating multiple guys at once. It was a reminder that you should never judge someone right away. The lady, Betty, invited all 3 of us to her church to meet the community in a few weeks. We smiled, but didn't make any promises. My mom had another treatment for her cancer and was doing okay. I didn't go to Maitland, but Melody, Harmony, and I spent a lot of time video calling my parents. We had also filed a legal brief against Dr. Stephen Morrison and the hospital, along with the video I took outside the cafe. Kim had gathered witness statements about the incident, and the Morrisons were asked not to return to the cafe. So far, nothing had happened aside from the filing. Kim told me that since there was no immediate threat, as I was in a different city, it might take up to 6 months for the case to be reviewed. The Maitland Hospital acknowledged our claim but had not said anything about discipline or defending Dr. Morrison. Kim thought they would wait to see how the case went in court before deciding what to do next. He was known as a talented surgeon, so I figured the hospital would keep him as long as possible to benefit from his skills. It was Saturday afternoon, and Melody, Harmony, and I were sitting in the lounge working on a huge jigsaw puzzle. You know, the kind with 10,000 pieces that look the same from different angles? It was a challenge, but we were enjoying it, and chatting about possibly visiting Betty's church when my phone rang. "Hey there, big sister. You got a minute for your little brother?" I said, answering the call with a happy tone. "Terry." Her voice brought my mood down instantly. "Kim, is everything okay?" I asked, feeling concerned as the girls looked at me in silence. "No, Terry, it's Mum. She's in the hospital with chest pains." I could tell from her voice that she was upset. "Okay, Hang on. I'm putting you on speaker. The girls are here with me. I switched to speaker mode as they gathered around, leaving the puzzle behind. Kim took a deep breath. Here's what I know. A couple of hours ago, Mom started feeling really unwell and then had strong chest pains. They called her doctor, and he said she should go to the hospital. Do you know if the pains were more in her breathing or lower down? Harmony asked, focusing on the situation. I'm sorry, Harmony, I don't know. Kim began to cry, clearly stressed, especially since she was close to giving birth. It's okay, Kim. Is Dad with her? I asked gently. Yes, but I don't know what to do. This is my mom, she cried. I wanted to reach through the phone and comfort her. I could see the concern in both my girls' eyes. Kim, I'll make some calls and come to be with Mom, Dad, and you. I have some leave days, so taking a week off should be fine. We talked for a few more minutes before ending the call. Next, I called William, who was at lunch with Martha and some friends, to get his okay for a week off. After he agreed, I called Sally to ask if she could cover for me, then I started packing a bag. A few minutes later, my girlfriends came in. Terry, Melody said, Harmony is going with you. I looked over at them. Harmony nodded and stepped out of the room. She returned shortly with a bag and started packing while Melody hugged me. We talked about it, and I wish I could go too, but we have a new supplier coming this week, so I need to stay at the office. Harmony can take the time off to support both you and Josephine. I was almost moving on autopilot, but at that moment, I felt so much love from my girls as I watched Harmony work with determination. Looking at my dear Melody, I could see that she was sad not to be coming with us. But she understood I had to go, and she was sending Harmony with me. What I loved most was that there was no jealousy in her eyes, just worry for me and my mother. I held her chin and leaned in for a kiss, feeling her relax in my arms. Then she pulled back. Okay, big guy, you need to pack, she said firmly. I'm sure Josephine will be fine, but you and Harmony need to go. She bit her lip while looking at me. I love you, Terry. We packed clothes and important things for 20 minutes and then got my truck ready for our trip. After hugging both Harmony and Melody goodbye, we started our long drive from Bathurst to Maitland. The atmosphere was serious most of the way, but it was the first time I had company for the drive. Harmony called her job and set up a week off before we were even an hour down the road. We had Melody on the phone for much of the time, and Harmony helped keep my mind off the hospital visit we had ahead. What stood out most was how Harmony's hand was always resting on me, showing her support and presence. We reached Maitland in the evening. We made good time and went straight to the hospital. Unfortunately, it was the same hospital where Dr. Dickhead worked. I hoped he wasn't there, and since we were in a different area, there was little chance we would run into him. Harmony had called Dad and gotten the details about Mom's location, so we parked and quickly found Mom and Dad. Mom looked worried, but wasn't in much pain. After Harmony and I received hugs from both parents, we settled in. Harmony picked up the chart at the end of Mom's bed and looked it over. Harmony nodded a few times and smiled at my mother. It looks like they're taking good care of you, Josephine. Your vitals are strong, and the tests they've run should tell us if there's anything to worry about. Well, they're giving me some strong pain medicine, so I'm not feeling too bad right now. The doctor earlier is informing my cancer specialist about what's happening and hopes I can go home soon if everything is clear, Mom replied. I smiled. That's great, Mom. Harmony and I are here all week, so whatever you need, we're here for you. Dad added, Thanks, son. You and Harmony can stay at our place. Is Melody also coming to visit us? I could sense a little smile from Dad. Over the past few months, Dad and Melody had become friends, and the awkwardness of me dating two identical twins had turned into lighthearted jokes and a feeling of family pride. "Sorry, John," Harmony said. "Melody couldn't come this time, but she promises to visit you with our friends soon." We chatted and even had a video call with Melody, William, and Martha from their home in Bathurst for about half an hour. As visiting hours were ending, we said our goodbyes, received hugs from Mom and Dad, and headed to their place. Dad told us he would come later and asked us to set up the spare bed. On the way there, we called Kim and talked to her and Paul for a few minutes, letting them know we had already seen Mom and were on our way to Dad and Mom's house. We planned to have breakfast with Kim the next day, said our goodbyes, and arrived at Mom and Dad's. I had a spare key for emergencies, so we let ourselves in, set up the bed, and showered. Unfortunately, the shower was small, so we cleaned up one at a time. After that, we climbed into bed and video called Melody on FaceTime. She was already in bed when she answered. "How are you guys?" Melody asked as I held the phone and Harmony cuddled up to me so we could both be on the screen. "We're good, Melody. We're at John and Josephine's and cozying up. Our buddy here is doing okay, but I can tell he misses you," Harmony said. "Aw," Melody replied, her eyes focused on mine. "Terry, I love you and wish I could be there with both of you." "I miss you too. I don't feel whole without you here," I said. "Harmony, can you make sure to take care of Terry for me? You know how he is. He'll need extra care without me around." "Of course, Melody, but right now I think we all need to get some sleep. It was a long drive. Can we call you in the morning before you go to work?" "Yes, but first give Terry a kiss for me." Harmony leaned in and kissed me. "This is from my sister. She loves you so much," Harmony said, laughing, as her sister enjoyed the moment too. I looked back at the screen. "Melody, I love you too." "Thank you, my love. See you both in the morning," she said and hung up. I exchanged kisses with Harmony, and we settled down to sleep. Harmony's phone ringing woke us up. It was Melody calling. "Wake up, you two," she said cheerfully as Harmony handed me her phone. "Terry, you didn't answer your phone, so I had to call Harmony." "Sorry, I must have left it on silent." "That's okay, my love," she said, using the term the girls often called me. "I just wanted you to see me get up." Suddenly there was movement, and I saw my beautiful Melody waking up. She positioned the phone at the end of our bed, stretching and yawning, playfully rubbing her sides to get our attention. After that, she pulled the blankets down and got out of bed, the camera showing a view of her legs. She had the camera set up so that she was just visible as she turned and bent over. Then she stood up, picked up the phone, and went into the bathroom. Harmony giggled while resting on my chest. "Harmony, I take it our friend is awake?" Melody asked her sister. Harmony giggled again. Before I could respond, she grabbed the phone from me, pulled the blankets down, and turned the phone to show me. "Yep, he's awake," was her simple reply to her sister. She handed the phone back to me and covered up again, but kept her head down. Melody giggled too, as she started doing her makeup in the mirror. The phone on the shelf gave me a clear view of her face as she applied her blush and lipstick. She raised an eyebrow and glanced at the camera. "She's busy with you, isn't she?" "Yes. How did you guess?" I said, slightly embarrassed. "Well, first of all, Harmony didn't come back to the screen. Second, I can see your expression. And finally, it's just a twin thing," she replied with a laugh. For the next few minutes, Melody chatted with me while Harmony kept busy. I couldn't last long. It was an unusual experience. Talking to one sister while the other focused on me was something I didn't think many people experienced. We spoke for a few more minutes as Melody got dressed. I also had a short video chat with her while Harmony went to the bathroom. We exchanged I love yous, and I handed the phone back to Harmony to talk with her sister while I took my turn. Dad left a note saying he came in around 1 in the morning and would sleep late, calling us when he woke up. So we got ready and headed into town for breakfast with Kim. "Hey there! How is my future nephew today?" I asked as I sat down across from Kim after giving her a hug. "Not too bad for carrying this little one, who feels like a beach ball bouncing on my belly," she said with a smile, patting her stomach. "I swear when he arrives, he'll have to help around the house for all this discomfort." Kim thought her first child would be a boy, while Paul thought it would be a girl. The rest of us mostly stayed neutral, excited to meet our new niece or nephew. We laughed and joked for a while, with Harmony asking Kim about how she was feeling. My girlfriend Harmony always liked everything about medicine because she worked as a nurse. When the server came to our table, I ordered a cappuccino and a breakfast wrap for myself, and a half-strength latte with fried eggs on rye bread for Harmony. My sister Kim just watched us. "What?" I asked after the server walked away to get our orders. "What would you have ordered if Melody were here?" Kim asked with a grin. "That's easy. A cappuccino with bacon and eggs, no toast but with a hash brown on the side," I replied with a smile. "Push over," she laughed back at me. For the next hour, we talked about everything from our mom's illness to Kim's upcoming baby. We also chatted about how Melody, Harmony, and I were doing. We even mentioned Carol and Mackenzie. After finishing my coffee, I thought about my past family and realized I didn't feel as angry towards them after our last conversation. With Carol, I found I didn't hate her, but I didn't care what happened to her either. As for Mackenzie, I had mixed feelings. I was puzzled by her behavior, being harsh around Stephen one moment and feeling sorry the next. I worried if I had lost my connection with her for good. "Penny for your thoughts, little brother?" Kim asked softly after a moment of silence. "He's thinking about Mackenzie," Harmony said. "How do you know?" Kim asked. "When he thinks about Carol, his eyes go blank and he gets serious. But when he thinks about Mackenzie, he looks down and has this lost puppy face. It can be hard to notice, but Melody and I have picked up on it over the last year." I smiled and leaned over to kiss Harmony. "And that's why I care about you and your sister so much," I said. "So sappy," Kim teased. But I knew it came from a place of love. If Paul could read my moods that well? She suddenly stopped talking, and Harmony and I exchanged curious looks. "Kim?" I asked. She had a funny look on her face that suggested she was surprised and maybe a bit embarrassed. Then we heard a sound like rushing water. "Oh no," she said. "My water just broke." The cafe staff jumped in to help, while we waited about 40 minutes for an ambulance to take Kim to the hospital. By the time they got there, Kim was feeling some mild contractions, but they weren't too close together. We called Paul, and he was on his way to meet the ambulance. Harmony and I planned to follow in my truck. The cafe workers were wonderful and wouldn't let us pay for our meal. We promised we would return once Kim and her baby were safe. Kim was in labor for almost 19 hours, and from the visitors' lounge, it sounded like she was having quite a hard time. Finally, little Candace, my first niece, was born. Despite the long wait, Kim was doing well, and my niece was perfect. I felt honored to be the 5th person to hold her. My parents had come down from the cancer ward after the birth of their 2nd grandchild, and we were all amazed. When Kim introduced Auntie Harmony and asked me to video call Auntie Melody while Harmony held my new niece, I recalled a past conversation where Melody and Harmony talked about wanting kids with me. As I watched Harmony cradling Candace, it hit me. I could have more children. Melody, seeing the moment through my phone, must have noticed something too. "Terry, can you call me back?" she asked. "Sure," I said. I ended the call and told everyone I would step out to talk to Melody privately. Harmony gave me a knowing look and whispered, "I love you," while snuggling my niece. I called Melody. "Hi, what's up?" I asked. There was a brief pause, and it felt serious. "Terry, are you okay?" "I'm great. Mom is getting better and should be home soon. Kim and Paul now have little Candace, and I have both of you. Why do you ask?" "Well, love, I saw the way you looked at Harmony while she was holding Candace, and I laughed. You want to know if I have thought about kids with you?" I could sense her blush through the phone. "Yes, with both Harmony and me. I saw it in your eyes, and it made me happy." "Melody, if I'm honest, I have thought about having children with both of you too, and it felt wonderful. Would you be okay if we talked seriously about this next week when we return home? I'm not saying we will try then, but I want us to have a plan." Melody squealed. "Oh my God. Yes, Terry. I really want Harmony and me to have kids with you. Watching Harmony just now, I think I understand how much you both desire this." I smiled, feeling excited about the idea of kids with them. "Look, we will only be here for a couple more nights. Then we will be home. Will you be all right until then?" "I miss you so much, Terry, but yes. Just promise me you'll hold me extra tight when you get back." "You got it," I replied warmly. "Excellent. Now take me back inside and let me talk to my sister." I walked back into the room, and Harmony had just finished passing Candace back to Kim for a nurse. Harmony reached out for the phone and stepped outside a moment later. Kim glanced at me, raising an eyebrow as she helped little Candace latch on. "Looks like someone is wrapped around a finger," she joked, and I chuckled. The following days were wonderful. It was just a short walk from the maternity ward to the cancer ward. Harmony and I spent the mornings with Mom, who was eager to go home. The new medications were helping with her pain, and the doctors had good news from the recent scans, preparing for her next treatment in the upcoming months. Mom was full of energy and excited to be a grandmother again. "Don't wait too long to give me more grandkids, Terry," she grinned, making me blush. Harmony wrapped her arm around me. "You can count on it, Josephine," she said, and my blush deepened. "We're all discussing it?" I changed the subject, and we chatted a bit longer about getting Mom home and planning a family dinner for the four of us before we headed out tomorrow. "Is it all right if I talk to Terry alone for a few moments?" my mother asked Harmony. "Of course, Josephine." Once Harmony left, Mom gave me a serious look from her hospital bed. "Terry, I know how much you care for both those girls. I assume there's no chance of a reunion with Carol?" "No, Mom. There's no chance of Carol and me getting back together. I really love both girls, and it may seem odd, but I can't imagine my life without either of them. They don't seem jealous of each other at all." She smiled and nodded, accepting my thoughts about Carol. "I can see how much they care for you, but I need to ask you something regarding the three of you." She hesitated. "Mom?" For a moment, she seemed a bit emotional. "If anything happens to me, if we can beat this cancer, I need you, Kim and Paul, to take care of your father." Mom started to cry, and I hugged her tightly. For a few minutes, we just held each other, mother and son. "Mom, I don't want to think about that, but I promise we will all look after Dad." "Thanks, Terry. That means so much to me." "It's no problem, Mom. You know what? Harmony and I were about to go see Kim. Why don't you join us? We can come back and finish packing before we head home." I held her hands and appealed to her feelings as a mother. "I'm sure Grandma can watch Candace for a little while." She paused, then smiled. All right, Terry, you've convinced me. He'll come with you. We walked out, and Harmony gave me a curious look. I shook my head a little, letting her know we would discuss things later and that my mom would join us to see Kim. If you have ever been inside a hospital, you know it can feel like a maze. There are hallways, offices, and rooms everywhere. Each space serves a purpose, whether for storing supplies or giving hard-working staff a place to take breaks or do paperwork. Over the past few days, Harmony and I had found the best path between the cancer ward and maternity ward, walking back and forth often. Today, my mom and Harmony were a few steps ahead of me, chatting about all sorts of things. I smiled, feeling happy to see my mom with one of the two women I care about most. I noticed my mom seemed to talk more freely with Harmony than she ever did with my ex-wife, Carol. Sure, she got along well with Carol, but this felt different. It made me realize how much Melody and Harmony had changed my life in the past year, and how well my family had welcomed them. It was also nice to see how our unusual relationship had been accepted by the community around Bathurst. I watched my mom and Harmony talking about grandkids, and it made me smile again. In the last couple of years, I'd gone from having a happy family to feeling like a weary husband and father, then becoming a hero, and now deeply in love with two wonderful sisters. I would do anything for them. I held on to hope that my mom would beat cancer and get to meet the new grandchildren I was thinking about having with my girls. As I approached a corner where the girls had just turned, I paused. Something felt off. There was movement behind me, and it felt threatening. A chill went down my arms. If you have ever been outside at night with no lights and sensed something moving in the dark, you know that feeling. I never expected to feel this way in a hospital, but it washed over me. In just a few moments, I turned to see what was causing my unease, and a sharp pain hit my left shoulder. It felt like a sudden sting, like something had pricked me. Before I could react, another jab hit close to the first. As I turned further, I saw Dr. Stephen Morrison standing there, a smug grin on his face. "I told you to stay away from my hospital," he yelled at me. "What? What have you done?" I asked, my shaking hand reaching for my back and pulling out two syringes that had been mostly used on me. He just smiled at me. From the moment I met this man, it all started that evening when I walked into my old home and found my wife and daughter gone, taken from me with only a letter and some papers that changed my life. I was furious at him. He had taken my wife and was acting like he was better than me. Each time we crossed paths, he showed off his status as a doctor, taunting me while I struggled to control my anger. In one of the few talks since our divorce, Carol hinted that he felt I might try to win her back. Looking at the smug man before me, I could see why. When you think of doctors on TV, you imagine confident and calm people who make quick, smart decisions. They inspire you while saving lives. But the man in front of me didn't fit that image. He looked out of shape, balding, and even with a smile on his face, he seemed unhealthy. "What have you done to me?" I shouted at him. I looked down at the syringes in my hands. "Tisk, Terry, my friend. You should watch your words in your final moments," he chuckled, stepping back. "It won't be long before you feel sleepy from the stuff I just gave you." He smiled a sinister grin and added, "But you won't wake up again, so I won't have to worry about Carol coming back to you." Just then, Harmony ran around the corner, followed closely by my mother. They both stopped in shock. I shouted, letting all my anger and pain out. I was done being quiet. I wouldn't let this man interfere with my life any longer. "I want nothing to do with you or either of those untrustworthy people," I exclaimed. "You're just a failure pretending to be important." I started to feel a tingling sensation in my fingers. Taking a step towards him, I clenched my fists. He stepped back but then looked past me, his eyes widening. Then he found his smile again, seeing Harmony holding on to my mother. Well, Terry, my boy, I have to give you some credit. She's much better looking than Carol. I guess you can be at peace now, knowing that once you're gone, I'll be with someone new who'll bring her happiness you couldn't give. How dare you! I shouted again and rushed at him. He stumbled backward, and I swung my fist with all my might, with all the anger and pain he had caused me, right at his jaw. My punch landed. The impact sent him crashing into the wall a few steps away. I could hear the hit and saw his head jerk sideways for a moment. Then he fell like a rag doll, and I noticed he must have bitten his tongue as blood spilled from his mouth when he hit the floor. As he lay there, his eyes rolled back, and he groaned as he lost consciousness. A terrible smell caught my attention. I spat on the ground beside him and felt dizzy. The effects of the drug he gave me were hitting me hard. Harmony was there right away, lifting me up. "Terry!" she cried, looking deep into my eyes. She could tell I was losing my grip on reality. My anger faded as I saw her concern. "He gave me these," I said, handing her the 2 syringes. "That guy over there said I wouldn't make it out of here. Well, I guess he won't make it out either." I chuckled weakly and fell to my knees as the drug took hold faster. Harmony dropped to her knees beside me and pressed us against the wall. She hit a black button, and alarms rang out through the corridors. She held my face in her hands and looked right into my eyes. She was crying. "Terry, please stay with me as long as you can. Every moment you stay awake helps us." I nodded, feeling a warm glow around Harmony. She seemed to shine even as everything else faded. I smiled. "You're amazing, Harmony. I love you and Melody so much." "I know, baby. We love you too." 3 security guards rushed in, followed by a doctor. Harmony handed him the syringes. "That man over there," she pointed, "injected my boyfriend with something dangerous. Please figure out what it is so we can help him." I looked at Harmony. I felt so tired. My vision blurred more. Then I heard a phone ring. Fast words filled the air. For a moment I got lost in the chaos, and then I felt something cool against my ear as Harmony held her phone there. "Terry, baby, what's happening?" my other wonderful girlfriend Melody asked on the phone. I looked into Harmony's beautiful green eyes. I could gaze into her eyes forever, feeling peaceful. "I got into trouble with that jerk, the doctor. I was starting to lose my grip on reality, mixing up my words." Harmony smiled softly. "Harmony asked me, Terry, are you with us?" Her voice sounded worried, and we all knew I was slipping away. "Yes, shh," I managed to reply. "We really need you to hang on. We love you." Melody's voice trembled on the phone. When I looked at Harmony, I saw tears streaming down her face. "Terry, our sweet Terry, please stay with us. We just found you," Harmony said quietly. "I'm so tired," I replied. More doctors rushed around us now. Eventually, they made Harmony step back and took the phone away. Some security staff lifted me onto a waiting stretcher while I noticed my mom comforting Harmony. In a brief moment of clarity, our eyes met, and I whispered, "I love you," without sound, and she understood. "We love you too," she said back. They started to move me down the hallway. I could feel the speed picking up, so I closed my eyes. As everything faded away, I thought about how much I loved them and wondered if I would wake up again. I could feel them moving me quickly, so I shut my eyes. Everything around me faded as the medicine took effect. I was loved and felt happy. I wasn't alone. Yet, as I began to drift away, I briefly wondered if I would ever wake up again. Part 4. My mouth felt dry, like I'd been out in the sun for days. You know that feeling when you can't quite get your lips together to bring some moisture back? That was how I felt as I slowly came back to reality. I was lying flat on my back in what seemed to be a hospital bed. My limbs felt heavy, and it took all my strength to open my eyes. Almost every part of me ached. At least I could hear because as I started to wake up, I noticed someone snoring. I tried to move a bit, and the snoring stopped. I felt something lift off my chest, and then I heard a voice that made me feel calm. "Terry?" The voice came from one of the two people in the world who could bring me back to life. That's how I felt now. But her voice made me wake up even more. Melody. My eyelids fluttered as I pushed myself to open my eyes. It was dark outside, and the hospital room was dimly lit. As my vision cleared, I saw one of my girlfriends lying on the bed with me, curled up against me on my right side. Melody loved to sleep on my stomach. Since we first met, that was her favorite spot. Even now, here in a hospital bed, she had managed to snuggle close to me without disturbing my position. "Harmony," Melody whispered to someone sitting in a chair beside my bed. "I think he's waking up." Almost right away, I saw another beautiful face. It was Harmony, who looked just like Melody. I tried to focus on her in the darkness. There was no difference between the two women. I loved them both deeply, and I knew they loved me back. "Well, hello there, handsome. Welcome back." Harmony smiled and gently took my hand, giving it a soft squeeze. I squeezed her hand back, although it felt like a huge effort. She leaned in closer and looked into my eyes, smiling as she saw me trying to focus. "It's okay, my love." She used the endearing term that the sisters had embraced as our relationship grew. "Don't try to move or talk yet. You have been asleep for a while, and we need to help you with a lot. But for now, just relax," my caring girlfriend told me. I tried to smile, but it was hard with the tube in my throat. I started to feel like I was having trouble breathing until both girls tried to help me relax. "Just take it easy, Terry. We had to put a tube in your throat to help you breathe. It might feel strange, but now you're awake, and I'm sure the doctors will take it out soon," Harmony explained. "You really scared us, Terry, but you surprised us by getting through it," Melody said. Her eyes showed how worried she was about me. Then she smiled, leaned in, and kissed my forehead. "It's okay, our dear. I know you have questions, but right now, just relax. We are here for you, and answers will come." Harmony looked me over again, then noticed the IV drip and called the nurse for help. Together, they pressed a few buttons on the machine. "Go back to sleep, Terry," she said gently. "We will be here when you wake up, and trust me, you will feel much better after a few more hours of rest." She was right. I drifted back to sleep and woke up a few hours later as the sun was coming up. A doctor came in to check on me. Neither of my girls had moved. After some initial tests, Harmony helped the doctor take the tube out of my throat, which felt unpleasant. The doctor continued with a few more tests, while Harmony handed Melody a cup of ice chips. Melody took care of me for the next half hour, giving me pieces of ice and waiting until they melted in my mouth before giving me more. I tried to speak a few times, but it took me a while to find my voice. "What happened?" I asked in a raspy voice. The girls exchanged glances. "Terry, there is no easy way to say this, but you died," Melody said with tears in her eyes. "What?" I managed to say. Harmony nodded. "Twice, actually, and almost a third time before the hospital staff figured out how to stabilize you." As I processed this, I remembered the brief encounter with Dr. Morrison. Harmony continued, breaking into my thoughts. "The emergency team got you to the ER quickly. I think you passed out on the way. Then, she said, her face showing sadness as she recalled the events, they managed to identify one of the drugs fairly fast. It was a common anesthetic used to put patients to sleep for surgery. The second drug was much harder to recognize. She held my hand tightly. Because he was a surgeon, they suspected he tried to give you something that could slow your heart, and an overdose could stop it completely. She sighed. We still don't know what was in the second drug. Both syringes are being tested at the lab for the police. So why am I still alive? I asked, genuinely curious. Harmony smiled. Good medical care and a team that knew how to help you. That's why you feel like you've run a couple of marathons. My muscles hurt a lot, but it was a strange feeling, almost like a mix of excitement and shock. How long have I been out? I asked. 3 days, Harmony replied, squeezing my hand. I let out a deep breath, feeling shaky like when I was hurt before. Melody leaned closer and kissed me softly. I could tell she wanted to share what happened. I was in a meeting with Dad and the new supplier when I started to feel unwell. It felt like something terrible had happened to Harmony, and I could sense it. I quickly left the meeting to call her. She told me you were hurt and let you talk to me, she said, lying beside me and holding my hospital gown as she quietly cried. When the hospital staff arrived, Harmony had to step out. Josephine went with her to see if they could help while I was worried on the phone. Dad noticed right away that something was wrong when I came back, looking upset and empty. Our friend had been hurt, and I wasn't there to help, she said, tears flowing as she recalled the moment. For a while, she cried, cuddled up next to me while Harmony rubbed her back. Once she calmed down, she gave me a few gentle kisses and then urged Harmony to do the same, which I was happy to allow. After that, she sat back up, holding on to me tightly, as if I might disappear. With a look and a nod from me, she kept going. I told Dad what had happened. Once he and the supplier understood the situation, the supplier agreed to reschedule. Within 2 hours, Dad, Mom, and I were flying here to Maitland. By the time we arrived, they'd moved you out of emergency and into this room. Are William and Martha here too? I asked. Of course they are. Melody smiled, wiping her tears away. They're at home with your mom and dad. They've been with us every day. Terry, you are family to us. Mom and Dad care about you a lot. They were just as worried as we were when we first found you here, unconscious and surrounded by all those machines. They'll be here later this morning. She gave me another hug. In fact, the whole family will come to see you as soon as they know you're awake. She leaned her head back on my chest, looking peaceful. For a few moments, I drifted off in my thoughts. As I did, I gently ran my hands through Melody's hair, while Harmony smiled at me, took my other hand, and kissed it. Then I realized I hadn't asked something important. What happened to that guy? I frowned. Harmony smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. Instead, it seemed like a predator ready to catch its prey. He's been arrested and is in the secure part of the hospital. You really got him good. Your punch messed up his jaw and cheekbone and hurt some muscles in his face. He also bit his tongue, and now his mouth is wired shut for at least 2 months, Harmony explained. I moved my right hand, the one I'd used to hit him. It felt a bit sore, but not too bad. That same hand was running through Melody's hair. She noticed and smiled, then took my hand and kissed it, just like her sister did with my other hand, understanding my thoughts. I should tell you that a couple of detectives want to speak with you now that you're awake. But you're not in any trouble, at least from what I've heard. His hearing will take a couple of months because he can't talk, Harmony added, still smiling. I nodded and sighed. I had come close to danger once again. As morning turned to day, my parents, along with William and Martha, came in when they heard I was awake. Mum looked a bit better. She was still weak from her cancer treatment, but stronger than when I had seen her just a few days earlier. Mum hugged me tightly. I was so scared, Terry. Harmony and I turned back when we heard you yell, and then I saw you knock that terrible guy down. She smiled, and her rare use of a strong word made us all laugh. After that, you collapsed, and I didn't know what to do. If it weren't for Harmony taking care of me, I would have fainted too. We just sat in those emergency room chairs, waiting for news about you. She looked worried. Terry, I am so sorry. I never thought someone could act like that. Neither did I, Mum, I replied. I knew he might feel threatened by me, and I didn't think we could be friends. But I never imagined he would go this far. I really wonder what made him lose control like that. Who knows, William said. But with how you act around my daughters, it sounds like your ex-wife might have had some regrets about her choice. Everyone was quiet for a moment, surprised by his comment. Then just as quickly, we all started laughing. The room filled with joy and laughter, and for the next half hour we shared light-hearted jokes until Paul and Kim arrived, pushing little Candace in a stroller. Well, I can see everyone is in a good mood, and it's nice to see you awake, little brother, my sister said, with a relieved smile. So, what's all the laughter about? Your brother's skills made the bad guy upset, and clearly his ex-wife has some second thoughts, Martha said. Once again, there was a moment of silence in the room. Again, no one expected such a funny remark from the quiet and proper lady of the Delotis family. Once more, the room filled with laughter. Kim glanced at me and gave me a wink. Around lunchtime, everyone except Melody and Harmony went back to my parents' house to rest. In the afternoon, the doctors helped me get out of bed to check in on me and guided me through some gentle stretches. Melody assisted me with my first shower in a few days, lending her support. Every part of me ached, and I had some muscle cramps that Melody kindly helped ease. If everything went well, I would get the results of my recent blood tests that evening. This meant the hospital could let me go home the next day. Although I would feel stiff and sore for a few weeks, I could continue healing at home if my tests turned out fine. Once I was released, the plan was to have lunch with my mom, Dad, Paul, Kim, and my new niece. Then William and Martha would fly home that evening while Melody, Harmony, and I would drive back throughout the night. While I waited for my results that afternoon, I had a visit from the two detectives working on the case against the person who had caused me trouble. They first took my statement about what happened. They also informed me that I would likely need to attend his court hearing. The next day, I was happy to be released. We enjoyed a lovely afternoon with family. And after eating, laughing, and taking some fun family photos, we all headed home. Melody, Harmony, and I drove back with Melody at the wheel, and we had a blast singing silly road trip songs and playing a game with license plates where we made words from the 3 letters on Australian plates. Melody won our game with the letters LCD. Most people know it stands for Liquid Crystal Display, but with a playful smile, she exclaimed, "Little cock doctor!" That's why I adore my girls. I returned home and got back to my routine without too much fuss. Everyone was glad to see me back, and after I shared my story a few times and enjoyed some drinks, we all settled back into our daily lives. I also spent quality time with Pastor Dan from Betty's church. One day we were sitting in a cozy coffee shop in Bathurst, talking about my life over the past few years. Once I reached the part I wanted to discuss, he paused and shared a few thoughts. "Terry, It's been a little over 6 months since Betty introduced us, and I must say that Melody, Harmony, and you have brought a lot of joy to our small congregation. We both laughed, recalling some of the funny comments people made when they learned I was dating both sisters. I can understand the anger you feel toward your past family, and I see why you decided to move away after everything that happened. The church tries not to judge, but I don't think I would have handled myself as well as you did. I raised my eyebrows, and he laughed. My job is a pastor in a church, but I am still just a man, like everyone else. If I were in your position, I would react differently. We sat quietly for a few minutes, sipping our coffee. Dan smiled as he enjoyed his drink. He was younger and worked full-time at the church. He had a lovely wife and a lively 4-year-old son who was always getting into some kind of trouble. I found myself liking him. I grew up around the church, with my parents attending their small Anglican church back in Maitland. Dan liked to think of his church as non-denominational. I appreciated that he talked about God without scare tactics. He focused on grace and forgiveness while encouraging people to build a real relationship with God, no matter their situation. I liked that. It made sense for me. He looked at me, eyebrows raised, leaning forward on the table. Given everything happening, you want to know how you should feel about wanting to marry both Melody and Harmony, right? I shrugged, and he laughed. Terry, you have one of the most amazing stories I have ever heard, and believe me, I've heard a lot. He smiled. And I think your story still has more to tell. I shrugged again. Before Carol and Mackenzie left, my life felt pretty ordinary. But since that night, I've learned to appreciate every moment. I looked at Dan. I continued. Dan, I believe in God, but I don't think God should be forced on anyone. It needs to be a personal choice. I want to marry my girls in a church with understanding, including my own, and it value your thoughts and guidance. Dan listened for a moment. It felt like he was considering the best way to share his thoughts, and then he surprised me. Terry, in the Old Testament, it was normal for a man to have several wives. The story of Abraham shows us that he had 2 sons with different mothers. It was only later, as Christianity and modern Judaism developed, that marriage became a one-on-one relationship. He looked at me to see if I was following along, and I was. However, no matter what happened back then, the truth is that you cannot legally marry both Melody and Harmony. Our country's laws allow only for one marriage at a time. I know some people live as couples in different arrangements, but they aren't legally married. We sat in silence for a moment. I suggested a thought. Dan, what if I only married one of the girls? We went through all the legal steps to say I married one of them, but what if I wanted to have a different kind of partnership with the other? Like a civil union instead of marriage. I'm not sure, Terry. I've never heard of anyone doing that legally, especially not in the church. Even if it were possible, which of the girls would you marry? Wouldn't the other feel upset? Part of the reason I'm even considering this with all 3 of you is that both Liz and I have noticed how much love and care you share, just like we do. So, is it unusual? Yes. Is it wrong in the eyes of God? I can't say for sure. But if you want to get married, you need to pick just one. He looked at me closely. Why are you bringing this up now? You have many good things happening. I would love to see you married, but wouldn't it be better to stay how you are and treat Melody and Harmony equally? You told me about how close you came to dying. Why not take things slowly? That's exactly why, Dan, I replied. I almost died. When I woke up, both girls were there, showing me their love and concern. It was clear to me. We are all connected in a deep way. Instead of seeing 2 women, I see all three of us together. If you'd told me this a few years ago, I would have laughed. Now I can't imagine being apart from them. I belong to both, and I want to marry both of them. We talked for about an hour about different possibilities. By the end, I felt certain about what I wanted to do. I was going to marry both my girls and be with them forever. Things went on as usual in the weeks that followed. I enjoyed cuddling with my girls each night. Sometimes we watched movies or did puzzles together, and other times we cooked meals. I loved every moment with them. One Saturday evening, we were having a barbecue in the backyard. Kim and Paul had come down for the weekend, supposedly to discuss the upcoming court case. But honestly, I think they just wanted to relax. Kim shared that Dr. Dickhead could finally speak again since his jaw was unwired, but he was still in the secure part of the hospital. If he left, he would have to stay under guard. After meeting with Carol and Mackenzie, Kim told me that the detectives who had questioned me spent over 3 hours talking to him. Kim was smiling, and somehow she had a copy of the interview. Although she wouldn't share all the details, she touched the side of her nose when I asked how she got it, hinting it was a secret. Most of the interview is routine, just standard questions from the detectives, Kim said, with a knowing smile and a hint of excitement in her eyes. But if you turn to page 15, there's a pretty interesting exchange about why he went through with his threats. I took the stack of papers, turned to page 15, and started reading aloud so everyone at the table could hear. Now, this is a transcript, so we need to picture the scene based on the words. In my mind, I saw Detective Rodriguez sitting across from the suspect in a bare room with gray walls, a metal table, and a single light overhead. I imagined the suspect slumped in his chair, likely realizing the situation was not in his favor. Here's what it says, Detective Rodriguez. Dr. Morrison, we've already confirmed through security footage and by your own admission that you attacked Mr. Other with intent to cause harm. What we still don't understand is why. Would you care to explain? Dr. Morrison. I couldn't take it anymore. Detective Rodriguez. What do you mean by that? We've established that Mr. Other never contacted or threatened you and didn't interact with you physically until you attacked him. Why then? Dr. Morrison. Because he humiliated me. Detective Rodriguez. How exactly did he humiliate you, Dr. Morrison? Dr. Morrison. My wife. Detective Rodriguez. Are you saying that Mr. Other was threatening your wife, his former wife? Dr. Morrison. No, he wouldn't do that. My wife, well, she talks in her sleep. Detective Rodriguez. And how does her talking in her sleep lead you to want to harm Mr. Other? The suspect pauses for a long moment before replying. Detective Rodriguez. Dr. Morrison? Dr. Morrison. Since we got married at least once a week, my wife, Carol, has dreams about him. She says she wishes she could turn back time, that she regrets leaving him. In her dreams, she tells him these things. Another pause. Detective Rodriguez. Dr. Morrison. In these dreams, what does she say? Dr. Morrison. She talks about how she still thinks of him as if he's the one she wanted all along. It's like every time she dreams, it's a reminder that him, not enough. Hearing it night after night, even though she's asleep, it just made me feel I could never compare. Detective Rodriguez. And this led you to act against him? Dr. Morrison. When I saw him at the hospital, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Just the night before, she had said his name in her sleep. She had a dream about him, not about me, but him. The next day, when I saw him at the hospital, I remembered I told him to stay away. At that moment, I felt like I had to take charge again. I needed to defend my place in my wife's heart and deal with him. And now, he is gone. My wife will never be tempted to go back to him. She will never have a reason to think about his looks and the dreams she had about him. At night, she used to talk about him and I had to listen. But now that he is gone, she is mine again. The suspect and officers were quiet for a while. Dr. Morrison, do you believe you harmed Mr. Other based on what you said? Officer Rodriguez asked. Of course, with what I did, he's finished. That lady and his mother saw it happen. I know I'm hurt and I have some legal issues to work through, but he is no longer here. And I am. This will all fade away in a few years, but his family will always be part of my life, while he is gone. The suspect chuckled. Officer Rodriguez continued. Just so you know, your attempt to harm Mr. Other did not work. He is alive. He was injured, but he has recovered, the suspect shouted, clearly upset. There were more pages in the interview, but by then, we were all laughing loudly. At least now we understood his anger towards me. I went inside and got a new round of drinks for everyone. Even Kim was having some wine tonight since she had enough milk for little Candace. We joked about many things for the next hour, mostly about the troubled guy and Carol's mixed feelings. Later, we asked how Paul and Kim were managing as parents. It's amazing, my older sister said with excitement. I am so tired every day, but I wouldn't trade being a mom for anything. And I've never had more fun with Kim, Paul chimed in, feeling relaxed after a couple of beers. Everyone burst out laughing, and Kim playfully leaned towards Paul before taking his hand with tenderness. So, ready to start on the next one? Melody teased, smirking at the couple's display of affection. Yep, Kim replied, but I need to wean Candace first. Apparently, breastfeeding can help prevent pregnancy, but I know it's still possible. She gave Paul a playful look. But that won't stop you from trying, will it, sweetie? I always admired their relationship. My sister could be a bit rude and sometimes hard to deal with, but she only had eyes for her husband. They playfully flirted with each other, just like they did when they were young and dating. Then Paul threw a question our way. But what about you three? Paul said, looking at Melody, Harmony, and me. When are you going to give me some nieces and nephews? I nearly sputtered my drink in surprise. Everyone laughed, this time at my reaction. William and Martha seemed a bit tense, but tried to act casual. They didn't say anything, but I could tell they would be happy to have some grandkids now that we had settled into our relationships. Actually, Harmony said, we've been discussing kids for a few months now. Melody added, Terry knows we want kids with him, and we know he wants kids with us. Her voice was firm, like it was a definite plan. I sighed, but nodded in agreement. Yes, they are right. We've been thinking about it for a while. For the next hour, we chatted about kids. Melody even brought out her phone, and we played with an app to see what our kids might look like. We ended up laughing a lot because the photos turned out great, no matter who I paired with. I felt happy, surrounded by loved ones. They only wanted my attention and time. So when Martha announced dessert, I helped her gather things. I chatted with her and then served warm apple pie with homemade vanilla ice cream. It was perfect. Before the night wound down too much, I stood up to get everyone's attention. I have a few things to share before we end the evening. Everyone turned to look at me. A couple of years ago, I felt like my life was falling apart. I was lost and hurt from what had happened with my previous wife and daughter. I was angry and confused. But then, friends offered me a new job in a new town, and am grateful for that opportunity. I nodded at William and Martha as a thank you. They smiled and held hands. On my way here, I faced a huge storm. A storm that changed my life for the better. I smiled at my girls. In that storm, I found two amazing and spirited women. While they often say I rescued them, they saved me as well. I realize now that without them, I would have felt empty and angry. With them in my life, I have more love and acceptance than I ever thought I could have. I know that life will always have its challenges, but I feel ready to face them with both of you by my side. Everyone at the table was smiling. Melody and Harmony looked so proud. I knelt down on the ground, showing that I see them as equals in my heart. The girls covered their mouths in surprise, and everyone gasped. Even Martha, who was on a video call with my parents. I had asked her to call them so they could see this special moment. I didn't tell her my plan, but I think she guessed. I pulled out 2 identical ring boxes from behind my back and held them out. Melody, Harmony, for nearly 2 years, you have shown me the meaning of true love. You both gave yourselves to me without hesitation. You took a man who was unsure and helped him learn to love you both deeply. I paused. And if anyone tried to come between us, I'd act to protect what we have, which made everyone laugh. Melody, Harmony, I don't know what the future holds for us, but I want to share it with both of you. Will you marry me? Yes, they shouted together. Let's start with Melody, Harmony said softly, as they helped me stand up. I took the first ring from its box and slipped it onto Melody's finger. It was a gold band with 1 diamond and a circle of tiny blue sapphires around it. Melody leaned in and gave me a sweet kiss, silently saying she loved me. Now, it's Harmony's turn, Melody said happily. I picked up the second ring, which was similar, but had a circle of purple sapphires. Harmony leaned in and kissed me warmly. I love you, Terry, she whispered. The 2 girls moved close to me as we faced the table. As always, Harmony was on my left and Melody on my right. Everyone cheered, and the girls spent the next few hours excitedly comparing rings and planning our joint wedding. Mom and Dad congratulated us and looked forward to the big day before saying goodbye and ending the call. After that, the excitement settled down, and everyone went home. That night, I saw something surprising. The twin sisters, wearing only their engagement rings, were showing their love for the man they cared about. Soon, people in our office and social circle learned that I had asked both sisters to marry me, and I hoped to marry them both at the same time. About a week before we had to go back to Maitland for the first court date concerning Dr. Dickhead, we sat down to discuss how our marriage would work legally. I knew we had to talk about this eventually. So, I shared my plan that I had created with Pastor Dan and had just started to include Kim as my lawyer. Girls, as you know in this country, I can only have one of you recognized as my legal wife. I've talked a lot with Dan, and he will perform the ceremony as if both of you are marrying me at once. I told them. I've also spoken with Kim, and we're working on a legal agreement that will be similar to a marriage. It will cover our rights but cannot be registered as a wedding. The girls' expressions became a bit less bright. However, I added, the wording we're using will let us refer to each other as husbands and wives. We need to decide on roles, but remember that I love both of you equally and there will be no difference for me. Do either of you have thoughts on this? The girls exchanged glances and nodded. Yes, they both replied at the same time. After a brief pause, Melody said, Terry, Harmony will be the one to become your legal wife, and I will sign Kim's legal document. Why is that? I asked. Melody explained. There are a few reasons. First, Harmony is older. By only 90 seconds, I chuckled. Yes, but it's one reason. The second is that Harmony always sleeps on your left side, which is where your wedding ring will go. I think that's a strange reason, but I see your point. Any other reasons? Yes, Terry. This next one is important, and I need to share some background first, Harmony said as she took my hand. I focused on my future fiancés and waited. As you know, our parents have done well, and Delotes Inc. is a family company passed down through generations. Any direct descendant in the family will inherit the company and take on its responsibilities. There are many rules in place to make sure we use our wealth wisely for future generations. I nodded, understanding a bit about the family's financial situation. Melody and I are the only direct descendants of our parents. Dad has no brothers or sisters, so it's just him, Mum, and me. Together, we all take care of the family trust. When you marry both Mum and Dad, you join our family and share that responsibility too. If I have children when they grow up, they will also have the same responsibilities. If anyone wants to leave, they can't take their share of money right away. They have to sign a paper and get a little money, but once it's gone, it's gone. So, what does this mean for marrying you instead of Melody? I asked Harmony. Terry, Melody explained. Harmony is a nurse while you and I work for the company. She is still part of the family but doesn't help it grow directly. Right now it doesn't matter much. But later when it's time to retire, Harmony will earn less money than I will because she hasn't helped the trust grow. Harmony agreed. Melody continued. By marrying you, she can have the same benefits that I do. She smiled at her sister. I would never hold anything back from my sister, but everything is arranged so the family continues to support the company and the family trust. Harmony blew her sister an air kiss, and Melody winked back. Okay, I get it now. But, Melody, are you all right with signing the legal agreement? She sighed, looking at Harmony and then at me. Yes, as long as I can call you my husband and have your children, I'll be happy. That night, we went through the details with William and Martha. They were very supportive and impressed by the legal papers that Kim was preparing. With everything discussed and a plan for my marriage to both my girls, we looked at a date a bit less than 5 months away. Kim assured me that the papers would be ready, and Pastor Dan was happy to do a private ceremony at the church for all 3 of us. When the week of the court hearing for Dr. Dickhead came, Melody, Harmony, and I decided to take the week off work. We drove from Bathurst to Maitland in my truck. Instead of going straight there, we took the scenic route. It took us just under 3 days, and we stopped in some lovely little towns to explore bakeries, cafes, and small gift shops. As someone who used to work with my hands, I enjoyed trying out the bakery's vanilla slice, even though I knew I'd need to run a bit longer for the extra calories when we got home. The girls bought some clothes from the little craft shops, and we got a few curious looks when we checked into the B&B with 1 king-size bed and 3 of us. At the first B&B on the first night, an older lady at the front desk asked if we needed a rollaway bed. Melody giggled and said, "No, our fiancé sleeps with us in 1 bed every night." The older woman was quiet for a moment, then forced a smile. I could tell she was surprised as we walked away, but we were starting to get used to people reacting to the 3 of us being together. On the second night, at a different bed and breakfast, an older man checked us in. He asked nearly the same question, and Melody gave almost the same response. But instead of being shocked like the woman before, the man just smiled widely and gave me a fist bump. The girls laughed, and as we walked to our room, I noticed them sway their hips a little more. I could definitely feel their hips bumping against my sides more than usual. When we arrived at my parents' house, we settled in and spent time with my dad. My mom was in the hospital after her latest cancer treatment, so we planned to visit her after we saw what would happen with the court hearing. Once my sister Kim arrived with Candace, we played with my niece. She was growing up fast and loved spending time with the twins. especially when one of them held her while the other played peekaboo. When Candace was happy being held by Harmony, Kim shared the details about the court hearing for the person who caused us trouble. "It should be simple," she said, laughing at our nickname for him. "He will be brought in, the charges will be read, and if the judge has questions, they will ask. This might include people like you or Harmony. Then the judge will ask if he pleads guilty or not guilty, and finally they will decide on any rules for him. That's all." I asked, "Will we need to be sworn in?" Kim laughed again. "It's possible. You might need to show who you are, but it's easy. The judge will ask the questions, and there won't be any cross-examinations like you see in the movies." We talked for a few more hours, until Paul arrived with takeout food, and we all enjoyed a big meal. Even Candace got fed when Kim pulled out a shawl from her bag to care for her daughter. I might have stared a little too long at my sister caring for her child. "You mean to say you have two beautiful fiancés? And you're still looking at your big sister?" she joked. I laughed back. "Well, for starters, you're right about my fiancés being beautiful, and you were the first big sister I ever saw, even if it was a long time ago. Lastly," I grinned and playfully pointed at her, "I'm a guy, and I appreciate beauty." Everyone burst into laughter. Paul set down his drink to speak, but Kim jumped in first. "Paul, if you say what I think you're going to say, I will make sure you regret it." "What? I wasn't going to say anything," he replied, though he was smiling. With his family gone, our family had become his. Melody laughed. "You were about to ask to see something, just like Terry gets to see his sisters, right?" It seemed Paul might have made that joke, but suddenly everyone gasped as both Melody and Harmony playfully showed off, surprising everyone in the room. My dad turned bright red, Kim laughed and spat her drink back into her cup, and Paul just stared wide-eyed while the twins put their shirts back down. I sat there with a grin, feeling pleased. "That's all you get to see tonight," Melody said with a laugh. "We keep our man happy with fun moments like that, but no one outside of family gets to see." "Finally," Harmony said, looking around and focusing on Paul. "If you say anything to anyone, your wife won't be your biggest worry." This made us all laugh again, and we enjoyed the rest of the night. Paul kept smiling and giving me high fives. As the evening wound down, I was upstairs and the girls were in the bathroom when my sister knocked on the open door. "Mind if I come in?" she asked. I invited her in and she sat on the bed. "How do you all fit in this bed?" she asked, smoothing the blankets. I shrugged. "Not sure. It's our first night doing this, but we'll make it work." She touched my arm. "That's what I appreciate about you, Terry. You could have turned bitter from what happened with Carol and Mackenzie, but you didn't. I think those girls saved you just as much as you saved them." "You're right, Kim," I said. Then she looked at me with concern. "Terry, tomorrow it's likely that Carol will be in court. As your sister, can I suggest you stay away from her? You both tend to get worked up." We chuckled. "Not a problem, Kim. If I don't need to talk to her, I won't." "Good." She stood to leave, but turned back at the door. "And Terry?" I looked over. She smiled and said, "Thanks for always being there. Those girls belong to Paul and Candace now, and it feels good knowing my little brother still notices." I blushed, but laughed. "Hey, that's what little brothers are for," I said, dropping my smile. "All jokes aside, I couldn't have asked for a better sister than you, Kim. I really love my big sister." "I know, Terry. I love you too." The next day, at the right time, Dad, Kim, Melody, Harmony, and I were sitting in the gallery of the courtroom with many people I didn't know. We were all waiting for the arraignment hearing of Dr. Morrison. Technically, he was still a doctor at this point, but we were sure that wouldn't last much longer. Today would show us what was to come. Just before the hearing began, a lawyer arrived and took a seat for the defense. With the lawyer came Carol, who looked very worn out and was dressed simply. She didn't look our way, and we mostly ignored her as she sat down behind the defense. Dr. Morrison entered through a side door with security and sat beside his lawyers. He didn't seem to notice me as he just sat down, staring at the floor. We all stood when the judge walked in and sat down as he called the hearing to order. This is an arraignment hearing for Dr. Stephen Morrison on the charges of assault with intent to cause harm and attempted murder against Mr. Terry Other. I also see here that you verbally confronted Mr. Other 2 times before the incident we are discussing today. Is this correct, Dr. Morrison? One of his lawyers responded. Your Honor, on behalf of my client, I would like to point out that the past incidents mentioned have nothing to do with the current charges against Dr. Morrison. The judge raised his eyebrows and said, Counsel, I see your name is Mr. Morrison. What is your relation to the defendant? I'm his cousin, Your Honor, replied the lawyer. Well, Mr. Morrison, even though you are family, I believe you should review the evidence against your client before coming into my courtroom. According to my notes, I have seen a concerning video where your cousin, Dr. Stephen Morrison, verbally attacked and threatened Mr. Other. Have you not seen this video for your client? He tried to shift the focus. Your Honor, we requested after the incident that the video not be included in the legal process and paid the necessary fees to both the courts and the medical board. The video was not supposed to be part of any evidence. I ask that it be removed from this or any future hearings. I glanced at Kim, and she had a satisfied look on her face. Earlier, Dad had mentioned that I recorded the video when Carol, Mackenzie, and Stephen confronted me outside the cafe. Their legal team had jumped into action quickly after that. They seemed to have quickly tried to get a court order to block the use of the video. That was what the lawyer for the other side was talking about now. I caught Kim's glance, and she motioned for me to pay attention to what was happening. If they thought money could cover up what happened that day, they were mistaken. The judge looked amused. Mr. Morrison, first, the order you thought you had to keep your client's behavior hidden was not done correctly and would not have been approved if reviewed. Second, whatever money was paid does not protect your client from facing legal action when someone's life is threatened. The whole defense team looked deflated. Third, personally speaking, I have seen the video, and I am not impressed with how your client or your client's family behaved. The judge continued. The video your client wanted to hide supports the case we are discussing today. It shows that your client, Dr. Stephen Morrison, harmed Mr. Terry Other and tried to take his life. Does your client understand the charges? The judge looked at both men. Both the attorney and Dr. Morrison gulped. The attorney answered, He does, Your Honor. Good. The judge then addressed everyone in the gallery. Is Mr. Terry Other present with us today? I stood up and replied, Yes, Your Honor, I am. Both Carol and Dr. Morrison looked at me for the first time. Carol looked surprised, while Dr. Morrison showed contempt. Mr. Other, the judge asked, are you willing to answer a few questions? My lawyer is here with me, Your Honor. I'd be happy to answer questions, but could she join me? I asked. The judge smiled. Of course. Please come forward. Kim and I walked to the main area of the courtroom and sat at what is usually the prosecutor's bench. Kim quietly told me to be honest and to look to her if I needed help. Now, Mr. Other, this is just a hearing, and I hope you can help fill in some details. He shuffled through papers that seemed to contain various reports about the history between me and the Morrisons. Mr. Other, can you tell me your relationship with the defendant? the judge asked. Sure. Dr. Morrison is married to my ex-wife and has adopted my daughter. Other than a few encounters, I do not have any relationship with him or my former family, nor do I want one. I was trying to stay calm, but I felt nervous. The only other time I'd been in court was for my final divorce hearing, where I had said nothing. That makes sense, Mr. Other. May I ask if you still have contact with your ex-wife or Your Honor? No, Your Honor, since the divorce, I've only seen Carol a few times, and most of those visits were not good for either of us. I've only seen Mackenzie a couple of times as well, I answered. So would you say there is no relationship with your ex-wife or daughter? He asked. That's right, Your Honor, I replied, shaking my head. On the day everything happened, I received the divorce papers, the adoption request for Mackenzie, and a restraining order preventing me from seeing either of them until all the legal matters were settled. I sighed and looked at the judge. He was giving me room to continue, so I did. I took it really hard, Your Honor. It felt like Carol and Mackenzie didn't want me in their lives anymore. I felt very low, and with those 3 documents, it seemed they were telling me I wasn't good enough as a father or husband. Carol even said I was not good enough at my job in the letter she left with those documents. So, no, Your Honor, I don't have a relationship with my ex-wife or daughter. I understand, the judge said, looking at me thoughtfully. Can you explain why you recorded the video from the incident at Maitland Cafe? He inquired. I straightened up. Yes. I had come back to visit my family because my mother was recently diagnosed with a serious illness. I noticed a gasp from the other side of the room and realized it was Carol. She didn't know. I went on. I visited my mother after her first treatment and wanted to get some coffee and breakfast for my parents, so I went to where I knew had the best coffee, Maitland Central. I smiled, and I heard a few people agree softly. Most folks know Maitland Central. They use a well-known coffee brand here in Australia. Anyway, I was just texting someone when my daughter started a confrontation. I tried to walk away to avoid making a scene, but Dr. Morrison chose to keep it going. Back at the cafe, I sensed trouble brewing. So I decided to record the interaction to protect myself in case it led to legal issues. Did you tell the defendant or your former family that they were being recorded? The judge asked. No, Your Honor. I was hoping there wouldn't be any conflict. And as my legal counsel later told me, we were in a public place. There was no legal reason I couldn't film, I explained to the judge. The judge nodded. Mr. Other, can you share how you felt after Dr. Morrison made the threat in the video? Honestly, Your Honor, I wasn't too worried. Dr. Morrison had been involved with my ex-wife for almost 2 years. Then my ex-wife and daughter seemed to want to hurt me as much as they could, from what I could tell. So, as you can see, Your Honor, I was carrying a lot of anger. I'm also strong and healthy. I work out at least twice a week. I've always known I could take care of myself. So, no, Your Honor, I wasn't afraid of any threats. Mr. Other, are you saying you expected to have a confrontation with Dr. Morrison? I chuckled a little. No, Your Honor. The good doctor, I glanced over at him, and he was staring at me, was the one who started each problem. I never planned to go after him, but if anything occurred, I wouldn't hold back. Okay, Mr. Other. Can you explain what you were doing at the hospital that day? Sure. I came to town in a hurry because my mother was taken to the hospital with chest pains related to her cancer. While I was in town, my sister was also having her baby. So, I was going between the cancer and maternity wards for a few days. On the day in question, Harmony, One of my friends, my mother, and I were walking to the maternity ward to help my sister get ready to leave when Dr. Morrison confronted me. One of your friends, Mr. Other? The judge raised his eyebrows at me. I blushed, and most of the room, except for Carol, Dr. Morrison, and his relative, laughed at me. Okay, putting aside your skills as a single man, were you not worried being in the hospital where Dr. Morrison worked that you might be in danger? The judge asked. Again, no. I wasn't, Your Honor. I thought I might see him. But I never imagined he would act on his threats. As a doctor, I believed in what do they call it? The Hippocratic Oath. Do no harm. The judge looked firmly at Dr. Morrison. Yes, Mr. Other, you are right. You should not have been worried. Now, moving on, just a couple more questions. What is your current health status after the incident? Well, whatever was injected into me was serious enough that I passed out twice in the emergency room. And I was told it almost happened a third time. I was out of it for a few days. And thanks to the care of my family and the wonderful medical teams at Maitland Hospital, I am here today. I smiled. I can say, Your Honor, that I have fully recovered with no lasting effects from my time in the hospital. I see, the judge replied, making notes as he looked through the papers. Finally, he looked at me with a spark in his eyes. Just one last question, Mr. Other. Going back to our earlier talk, you mentioned that your ex-wife and daughter left you because you were a plumber, right? Yes, Your Honor. That is what I was told. Are you still a plumber, Mr. Other? I'm still certified as a master plumber, Your Honor, I replied. The judge chuckled. That's a very formal answer, Mr. Other. Let me ask it a different way. What is your job now? I could see where this was going. The judge seemed to enjoy having a little fun at Carol's expense. Well, today I work for Delotes Inc. as the National Quality Manager for all product lines for both local and international markets. Very impressive, Mr. Other. It seems you are more than just a plumber. Thank you, Your Honor. That will be all. I appreciate your time, Mr. Other. With that, we returned to our seats. Carol watched me closely as I sat down with the girls, who both took an arm and held it tightly. We listened to a long speech from Dr. Dickhead's lawyer. They tried to argue that Dr. Dickhead was a good person in the community, aside from my earlier issues. At one point, the judge looked over at me and raised an eyebrow at how Melody and Harmony were clinging to me. I smiled back, and he tried not to laugh. After everything was said, the judge directed us back to the matter at hand. Mr. Morrison, considering all that has been discussed today, your client should understand the seriousness of the evidence presented. How does your client plead? Your Honor, at my client's request, I am entering a plea of not guilty. Dr. Morrison's cousin looked down, avoiding everyone's gaze. No one spoke. Everyone expected him to plead guilty and ask for leniency. I couldn't understand how he believed he was innocent. For a moment, I felt my frustration rising. Melody and Harmony tightened their grips on my hands, and Melody leaned in to kiss my cheek. It's okay, love. Just let it go. We're here for you, she whispered. With some effort, I did. I must say, I am somewhat surprised, the judge said. Based on our discussion, I will review all evidence and make my recommendations for the trial. Bail for Dr. Morrison will be set at $2.5 million. He will also need to surrender his passport, wear a GPS tracking bracelet, and check in with the Department of Corrections once a week until the case is resolved. Based on the evidence presented, I believe that Dr. Morrison is not a serious flight risk or likely to reoffend. The judge turned to Dr. Morrison. Do you understand and accept the conditions of your parole? I want to hear this from you. Not your lawyer." He hesitated. Yes, Your Honor, I accept and understand." "Good. Now, I have one last comment, Dr. Morrison. This concerns everything that has happened with Mr. Other's wife until now. Are you listening?" Everyone was focused and listening closely. Dr. Morrison replied, "Yes, Your Honor. I'm listening." The judge leaned forward a bit and looked at Dr. Morrison with a serious expression. "Given what I've seen and heard today, I would normally set a restraining order to keep you from coming near Mr. Other and his family. But I won't do that. Do you know why?" "No, Your Honor," he said nervously. The judge smiled a cold smile. "I'm not doing it because Mr. Other has shown he can take care of himself, even in difficult situations. He made it clear today that he wants nothing to do with you. I suggest that whenever you see him, you turn and walk away, or you might end up back in trouble." Dr. Morrison swallowed hard and nodded. He also glanced at me for a moment. I caught his eye and winked but didn't say anything. The judge leaned back, satisfied. "I want to remind you, Dr. Morrison, that you have 90 days to change your plea. If I were in your position, I would think carefully about your choices. After 90 days, a court date will be set based on your plea at that time. This hearing is now closed." We all stood up as the judge left. Dr. Morrison was taken out through a small door with his lawyers, including his cousin, and Carol looked back at us briefly. Afterward, we sat at a coffee shop outside the court in the winter sun. It was early afternoon, with a light and cool breeze, and we enjoyed a late lunch. Harmony asked Kim, "So, how did it go?" "Pretty much as expected," Kim replied, looking at me. "He did really well." "He's good at that," Harmony said, as if everyone knew. "I almost lost it when that guy didn't admit his guilt," I complained. "I know, dear," Melody replied. "But you handled it well." I leaned over and gave her a quick kiss. Then I turned to Harmony and kissed her too. "Thank you, my beauties. I must say it felt great to see Carol again, new life, new job. I enjoyed the surprised looks when I mentioned girlfriends." "Fiancés, you mean?" Harmony corrected me. "Yes, fiancés. Sorry, I'm still getting used to that, but soon it will be wives." Melody giggled. Harmony looked at me, thinking carefully. "So, was Carol the woman sitting near that guy looking like she was about to explode while you spoke?" "Yeah, that's her," Kim said for me. "Humph," Harmony snorted. "I didn't see her well, but she really missed out." We all laughed. And just then my phone buzzed. It was a message from someone I didn't expect, Carol. "Terry, I know you don't want to talk, but I would like to see you about some things. Could we meet on the courthouse steps in 15 minutes? I frowned, and Melody noticed. "What is it, babe?" I showed her the message. Then Harmony. Then Kim. Doesn't she get that I don't want to see her? I thought I made that clear today. "I know, honey," Harmony said gently. She looked at me and then at Melody and Kim, who both nodded. "But I really think you should go talk to her. Just stay calm and think of us if you need to. And remember, you can always walk away," Melody added. I couldn't argue with my girls. They knew I needed closure, so I sighed, knowing they were right. I met Carol on the courthouse steps a little later. "Hi, Terry. You look good," she said awkwardly. "Carol," I nodded. "Come on, Terry. Is that all you have to say after 15 years of marriage? I know I hurt you, but it's been 2 years. Surely you aren't still that angry?" I paused for a moment. Everything about our past interactions had been calculated, usually about money. I set my jaw and gave her a skeptical look. "How I feel doesn't really matter. And I know you didn't ask me here to find out how I'm doing. You left and haven't bothered to check on me since. So what is this about?" She looked taken aback, shocked that I was so blunt. She raised her hand to her chest, trying to show some sympathy. "Terry, have I really been that unkind?" She tried to look sad, but I wasn't convinced. She switched topics, eager to connect. "So I hear you are dating again. Was it one of the girls I saw you with recently?" Carol asked, seeming to miss the fact that others had heard more than one name. I felt my expression harden. I didn't want to share this with her. "Yes," I replied. She nodded, drifting into her own thoughts as she tried to ask for something. "That's nice. And you've moved up to quality manager, which is a good step up, right?" She said more to herself than to me. Her hands started to fidget as she watched me. I sighed. "Carol, I've told you before I really don't want to share my life with you. I had a chance for happiness. And with very few exceptions." I paused and gestured toward the courthouse, trying to show her that my past with her and her husband still troubled me. "So what is this about? Why did you want to meet?" She sighed. "Terry, because of you, we don't have any money coming in. Yes, we can cover the basics with Stephen's trust, but with his bail and parole costs, we are using up a large part of the fund. It's tough to manage." She looked at me with hopeful eyes. "I was hoping you might consider letting me use Mackenzie's university fund so we could cover our expenses." I stared at her in shock for a moment, or maybe longer, until she prompted me to respond. It felt like she didn't realize the extent of the hurt she had caused and just kept pushing. "Terry, did you hear me? Given everything going on and our financial struggles, could you think about giving me Mackenzie's university fund?" I began to smile, and for a moment, so did Carol. But then her smile faded as mine grew wider. I couldn't hold back my laughter, which turned into hearty chuckles that made tears form in my eyes. Carol looked embarrassed, so I stopped laughing and guided her to a nearby wall. "So, Carol, let me see if I understand this correctly," I said. "Your husband, who I see as a real disappointment, took you away from me, claiming to give you a better life. He convinced you to betray me and took in my daughter, spinning the same stories for her, leaving me without any warning." I continued. "He threatened me with your support, and when he got the chance, he nearly hurt me badly. And now, here we are." I gestured toward the courthouse we stood in front of. I began to count on my fingers. Because of everything that has happened, he is going to lose his job, and he won't be able to work in medicine again. He may also spend the next 20 years in prison due to his choices. So you want me, the person you mistreated, to give you money that you don't deserve just because you think it's my responsibility, right? She straightened her shoulders and looked at me a little smugly. "Well, I wouldn't say it exactly like that, but yes. If not for me, then for your daughter. Mackenzie and I have certain living standards to keep up with, and since Stephen can't work because of you, that's what I need." I stared at her in disbelief. "Carol, if you were anyone else, I'd call you out of your mind. But I'm not, Terry. You know that." She smiled, thinking she was winning me over. "I know you, Carol. And after everything we've talked about in the last 2 years, I can confidently say you're being unreasonable." Her smile faded as she stepped back and I continued. "Your living standards mean nothing to me. When we were married, we were content with what we had. Our needs were met every month." I waved my hands as I spoke. "You just mentioned how much your husband has in his trust. For most people, even after paying for bail, that should be enough to support you until you find work." She paused, looking unsure. Yes, a job, Carol. Do you remember what it's like to work for a living? However, it seems like you and your daughter aren't happy with regular jobs. But what you want isn't rightfully yours. You didn't earn it, and you don't deserve it. I felt myself getting upset. I tried to stay calm. Now, your husband has tried to hurt me, and you have the nerve. I took a deep breath and glared at her, echoing her own words back to her. No, you have the audacity to ask me for money to buy more unnecessary things. Old anger resurfaced, but then I thought of the transcript Kim showed me, and I took a moment to cool down while Carol looked a bit worried. Carol, do you know why your husband dislikes me so much? As I confronted her, she glanced down, as she had the last time I spoke strongly to her. But this time, she looked up at me. Her voice was soft as she asked, "No, not really. Stephen never explained it, but he got upset whenever Mackenzie or I mentioned you, especially in the mornings." I chuckled lightly. "Carol, did you know that you talk in your sleep?" Her curious look grew, her head tilting to the side. "Terry, you've known that since high school. But what does that have to do with anything?" "Carol," I said again, "you talk in your sleep. When we were married, you would often speak your dreams, and your husband, Stephen, he was hearing those dreams at night." "So?" she replied sharply, a bit embarrassed. "That has nothing to do with why he—" She stopped, unsure. She looked at me, her expression confused and searching as if trying to piece things together. "Stephen couldn't have really heard anything like that, could he?" she asked, her voice almost pleading. I saw this was my chance to finally be honest with her. "Yes, Carol, your husband has grown to resent me. He tried to hurt me because in your sleep you dreamed about coming back to me. You dreamed of how things used to be, and in those dreams you told me how much you missed everything we shared." Her face began to change as the truth sank in. Realizing what had happened seemed to shock her deeply. In a low voice, I added, "Carol, even while you were with him, it seems you kept remembering how things were with us. And now, Stephen knows he can't compete with those memories. He knows he'll always be fighting something he can't understand." The look on her face was one of pure realization and pain. She seemed at a loss for words. I took a step back, feeling calmer than I had in a long time. "No, Carol. You made your choice long ago. Now go back to the life you chose. Goodbye, Carol." Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there. I didn't feel the need to look back. I was happy. I had a smile on my face. I didn't think about her at all. My good mood lasted for quite some time after that. My bond with the girls kept getting stronger, and our wedding plans were progressing well. Work was going smoothly, and I felt like I was really getting the hang of my role at Delotes Inc. When my birthday came, the girls took me out for a nice dinner and then to a local club to dance. It was clear that we were the center of attention. The girls wore matching green dresses, and their hair was beautifully styled, making them look like models. They dressed me in a sharp navy blue suit, making me feel really special. During the night, a few guys approached me asking for drugs, while the girls were away in the bathroom. When the second guy asked, I was curious, and asked him why he thought I would be someone who sold drugs. His answer made me laugh for the rest of the night. "Dude, you have 2 of the most stunning women with you. They only have eyes for you. We would love just a glance from them." Then he looked me up and down. "And you look like you own the place. So we just assumed." I have to say, that really lifted my spirits for the rest of the evening. We danced until the early morning. When we finally got home, the girls took care of me a few times before we all ended up asleep in a happy jumble. I didn't hear from Carol or Mackenzie for my birthday, No messages, no card, nothing at all. But like previous years, I didn't expect anything. I had some hope after my last conversation with my daughter, but that hope faded. A few days later, on her birthday, I decided to reach out. I still had the number she had texted me from during her mother's separation, so I called her after lunchtime at work, but it went to voicemail. "Hi, Mackenzie. It's Dad. Well, I guess it's Terry now." I hesitated in my message, unsure of what to say, but I continued on. "I know today is your birthday, and I wanted to take this chance to connect with you. I hope we can rebuild our relationship after our last talk. Our lives have changed a lot, but I miss you, and I miss our time together. I just wanted to wish you a happy birthday and hope you have a lovely day. Bye." I hung up and sat there for a moment. Melody walked in a moment later and sat down on my lap, gently wiping away a tear that I didn't even know was there. "What's wrong, dear?" she asked, looking worried. "Nothing. I just tried to call Mackenzie to wish her a happy birthday. It's today, and I thought there might be a chance for us to talk again," I explained to my fiancé. She softly stroked my cheek. "Oh, sweetheart, you are such a wonderful man. Even after everything that has happened, you still want to reach out to your daughter." My phone beeped. "See? That's probably Mackenzie thanking you for your message." I looked at my phone. It was from Mackenzie, but it wasn't a thank you. "Leave me alone. You put my father in jail. My mom is upset after talking to you, and you think it's okay to try to reach out to me. I can't stand you." A moment later, another message came in. "If you want to do something for my birthday, give me my money for school so I can buy myself something. Otherwise, just keep being a terrible father." I was stunned, but there was one more message. "You know what? Don't give me anything for my birthday, just like the last few years. I'm old enough now that I could take you to court for it, so get ready, because I will." I dropped my phone and leaned back in my chair, Melody still in my lap. "What have I done, Melody? Why does my own daughter hate me? During the family visit, I thought maybe we could reconnect. But now this." I was shocked by the anger in Mackenzie's messages. For a few minutes, neither Melody nor I said anything. Then she looked at me. "Terry, you have done nothing wrong. Mackenzie has been influenced to see you in a bad light. We know that Dr. Richard got out of jail, so he's probably been speaking poorly of you, which has affected how she feels." I nodded. Melody's hand on my arm felt comforting. She picked up my phone and went to the desk phone. I watched as she dialed a number I assumed was Mackenzie's. After a moment, someone answered. "Hello? Is this Ms. Mackenzie Morrison?" I only heard Melody's side of the call. "I just wanted to confirm that you sent the texts to Mr. Terry Other's phone a little while ago." She listened for a moment. "I see. It doesn't matter who I am, but yes, I am with him right now." She listened again, frowning as she did. "Okay, Ms. Morrison. Thank you for confirming it was you. I doubt we will talk again." And with that, Melody hung up. "I'm sorry, but your former daughter is really upset," my fiancé said. I had never heard her speak like this before. It showed how angry she was. She settled back on my lap, quiet for a moment, as she gathered her thoughts. I could sense her frustration, so I began to gently rub her back. When she felt my touch, much of her anger faded. She admitted sending those messages, and she wants that money. She said she's getting legal advice and plans to sue you. Melody continued, frowning. She told me to say you ruined her life and that you should just go away. I'm sorry, Terry. If you thought she felt bad when you were in Maitland, that feeling is gone now. I looked down, feeling defeated. I know, Melody. This feels like the end of our relationship. I hoped one day I could make things right with her. But I guess that's not possible. Now. Melody wrapped her arms around my neck. I know you are hurting and wished for a chance to heal things. She leaned in and kissed me, then looked into my eyes. All I can say is that Harmony and I are here for you. We don't like what they've done to you, but if it hadn't happened, you wouldn't have met us. I smiled and kissed her back. I understand, Melody. We'll just have to see what happens next. I can't help but wonder if that last talk with Carol or being in court with Stephen changed things for Mackenzie. Definitely, Terry. She sounded almost rehearsed when I spoke to her. I'm angry at how she hurt you, but a part of me feels sorry for her. Someday, she may feel regret and not know what to do with it. The real question is, do you want to be there for her when that time comes? I paused, truly thinking about her question. I'm not sure, Melody. I feel so hurt when I think of Mackenzie. I don't know if I could welcome her if she showed up one day. I think it's time to close that chapter of my life for good. I looked up and smiled at her again. On the bright side, I have two amazing women I love deeply. And soon, I'll marry both of you, who both want to start a family with me. You know how to make a girl smile, Melody said as she kissed me again. What's this about starting a family? Sally, my colleague, said as she walked into the room. Terry is talking about making sure both Harmony and I have families soon. Sally laughed. Over the past year, she had become very close to me, and she was one of only 2 bridesmaids for our upcoming wedding. Kim was set to be another bridesmaid. With the way you girls walk half the time, I don't think it will take Terry long, someone joked. Practice makes perfect. Hey, you leave it to us, Melody said. Sally and I are going to chat about your impressive skills, not to you. I stayed quiet. However, Melody seemed to bump into me more than needed as they talked. That night, we updated Harmony, William, and Martha about the call with Mackenzie. Then we called Kim to share what happened. They were all shocked and decided to focus on the wedding, waiting to see if anything would come from Mackenzie's threat. It was just a month before the wedding when Kim got the papers from Mackenzie, who was suing me for money from the university account. The court date was set for the Monday after my wedding to the girls. We were supposed to leave for our honeymoon that Monday evening, so we had to change our plans. William arranged for a special flight on Sunday afternoon, then another to Sydney after my court appearance on Monday morning. This way, we could catch our flight to Honolulu later that evening. The Delotes Family Trust had given us enough for a 10-day honeymoon with all expenses paid. As we planned, I felt certain that the issue with Mackenzie would be settled in court, allowing me to move on with my wonderful brides. Despite concerns about the 3 of us getting married in the church, the wedding itself was amazing. Pastor Dan had assistance from several church members, along with Martha, to decorate the church. During the ceremony, William proudly walked both his daughters down the aisle. They wore matching gowns with a train that flowed behind them, showing their promise to be wives together. Most of the staff from Deloitte Inc. attended, along with my parents and Paul, my best man, Kim as bridesmaid, and Candace, who was now more aware of her surroundings and laughed at everything. When Pastor Dan smiled and said, "You may kiss your brides," I kissed both my girls, and everyone applauded. As we signed the registry, Harmony and I completed the official wedding papers with Pastor Dan, Melody, and Paul as witnesses. We also signed the final pages of the legal agreement that Kim had prepared for Melody to be legally recognized as my partner in a civil relationship. We had already signed the main document, which outlined that I would be Melody's life partner. While we weren't officially married, we agreed on many things that a traditional married couple would naturally share. Kim had printed the signature page on the same nice paper as the official wedding registry. We had around 100 people at the reception afterwards. I danced with each of my brides while William and my dad took turns dancing with the one I wasn't with. I also danced with Martha and my mom, who was getting weaker. She was not doing well against cancer, but her doctor said she was not losing the fight either. Every treatment helped reduce the cancer, but it also took a toll on her. We had heard some hopeful news about a new treatment with a bone marrow transplant and a new type of chemotherapy, but that was still a few years away. It gave us hope. Most of the guests stayed until we left around 1 in the morning. My mom and dad had arranged our hotel room. We did spend some intimate time together, but after such a long day, we quickly fell asleep. In the morning, refreshed, we enjoyed more special moments together. My brides surprised me with a thoughtful gift. It was a new experience for me, but I realized I preferred more familiar feelings of closeness. Still, the thrill of the moment was exciting. After checking out, we returned home to knowing smiles and a light lunch with William, Martha, my mom, Dad, Kim, and Paul before heading to the private airstrip for our flight to Maitland. Mom and Dad, along with Kim, Paul, and Candace, would be flying with us. I hadn't thought much about the court hearing concerning Mackenzie's claim. However, as we took off, I opened the papers Kim had prepared for me. The hearing would be closed to the public since Mackenzie was still legally a minor, even though she was above the age of consent. She could sue me as an adult, but it had to happen in family court, allowing only close family members to attend. This meant only the involved parties, including Mackenzie, could be there. Mackenzie was suing me for the original amount of $142,000 recorded in our account during my divorce from Carol. She also wanted an additional $250,000, claiming emotional distress and financial troubles. Since my wives could not be in the courtroom, Paul and my brides waited at a cafe across from the courthouse while my parents went home. Kim and I were there together to see what would happen. We didn't see the others until we were called into the courtroom for the hearing. They entered through another door connected to a different hallway. So on my side, it was just Kim and me. The man and Carol were wearing what I thought looked like fancy clothes for court. Mackenzie was dressed in a nice suit, but she had on too many necklaces and rings that made her seem younger than 17. To me, it looked a bit overdone. We waited a few more minutes for the judge to arrive. During that time, I noticed the man giving me cold looks several times. When he got a chance, Mackenzie showed me how she felt by making a cutting gesture across her throat and silently calling me a bad name, with the man grinning at her actions. I turned my focus back to the front of the court, trying to stay calm. Kim gently placed her hand on my arm, reassuring me that everything would be okay. She reminded me that once this was over, I could go on my honeymoon with my wives. That thought made me happy. Soon after, the judge walked in, and I felt a smile spread across my face while the man and Carol appeared unhappy. Today we had the same judge who handled our divorce last time. Kim held my hand tighter as we stood up to show respect to the court. "Let's get started," the judge said, and we took our seats. He glanced at some papers for a few moments, then looked at Mackenzie, and finally at me. "It seems we have met before. Mr. Other and Mrs. Morrison, I remember seeing you in my court a few years ago," the judge said. "Yes, Your Honor," I responded, while Carol just nodded. The judge looked at his papers again and then at Mackenzie. "And I believe you are Ms. Mackenzie Morrison, formerly the daughter of Mr. Terry Other and now the adopted daughter of Mr. Stephen Morrison. Is that correct?" I had to hold back a laugh at his mistake. With her lawyer's nod, Mackenzie answered, "Yes, sir. I mean yes, Your Honor." And today we are here because you are suing your biological father for your university funds and claims of emotional distress and financial trouble. Is that right, Ms. Morrison? With another prompt from her lawyer, Mackenzie replied, "You are correct, Your Honor." The judge paused as he read more papers. "I see here that your adopted father has faced serious charges for a recent incident involving your biological father. According to this report, your biological father was in critical condition for a time." Mackenzie looked shocked, realizing her parents had not told her this. I kept my attention on the judge. "Because of this," the judge continued, "your adopted father has lost his medical license, is waiting for trial, and is here today only because we are considering your status as a minor in this case." The judge looked closely at Mackenzie. "Ms. Morrison, can you please tell me why you are suing your biological father?" During the whole conversation, Mackenzie kept looking at me. She never heard what the judge said. "Ms. Morrison?" Her lawyer tapped her on the arm, bringing her attention back to the judge. "It seems, from your reaction to Mr. Other, that you didn't know your adopted father tried to harm your biological father, or that Mr. Other nearly faced serious consequences." No, Your Honor, I did not." Mackenzie suddenly looked uncertain. "So, Ms. Morrison," the judge continued, "let's change the focus a bit. Based on what you know, can you tell me if Mr. Terry Other, your biological father, has caused you any form of mental distress?" Well, it's like he. Mackenzie seemed very unsure. She glanced at her mother and then at her adopted father, who both looked unhappy, but their expressions were directed at me. I kept my gaze forward. Her lawyer intervened. "Your Honor, if I may, Ms. Morrison's claim of mental distress is based on Mr. Other's refusal to leave her father alone." The judge appeared entertained by the lawyer's remarks, but allowed him to continue. "Mr. Other had several interactions with her father, each time leaving the family upset. This is the basis for the claim of mental distress." "I see, Mr. Forsyth. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And how long have you been practicing law, Mr. Forsyth?" 2 years, Your Honor." 2 years? And how many cases have you handled involving family issues where people are suing based on weak and unproven evidence? This would be my first one, Your Honor?" "Yes. It does appear to be your first case, Mr. Forsyth." The judge smiled slightly. "Mr. Forsyth? Ms. Morrison, allow me to clarify a few things. First, I have no evidence showing that Mr. Other has been unkind or unfair to his former daughter. In fact, the police reports and video evidence I have reviewed tell a different story." The judge turned to Mackenzie. "Ms. Morrison, do you often refer to your biological father, who raised you for most of your life, using the term jerk?" "Your Honor, I object," said Mackenzie's lawyer. "Ms. Morrison should not be expected to respond to a rude comment like that." "Overruled, Mr. Forsyth. I have it documented in confirmed text messages sent recently to Mr. Other, as well as in the video evidence related to this case, where it was claimed that Mr. Morrison tried to seriously harm Mr. Other." The judge said calmly, "Once again, Ms. Morrison, do you call your biological father a jerk?" She hesitated and flushed, but attempted to answer. I'm embarrassed to say yes, Your Honor, but I didn't know Stephen tried to harm him. If I had known." The judge raised his hand. "I wasn't asking for an explanation, Ms. Morrison. I asked a simple question. Now, another question, Ms. Morrison. Has your biological father ever treated you badly before you and your mother left him? Did he ever hold back love and care?" Mackenzie looked at me. but I just stared at the judge, afraid to meet her eyes. No, Your Honor. He was never cruel. She kept her head down. Thank you, Ms. Morrison. One more question, the judge said. After the day you and your mother left your biological father for your adoptive father, did Mr. Other ever hurt or mistreat you? Mackenzie glanced at me, at Carol, and then at the man who had caused her pain. He gave a small nod, as if trying not to be noticed. Her voice was quiet. Yes, Your Honor. Many times. The judge leaned back. I was about to yell an objection when Kim grabbed my hand tight. I understood the message and stayed quiet. Could you please explain the mistreatment that you mentioned? Ms. Morrison, even a minor can get into trouble for not being truthful in court, the judge asked. Mackenzie looked at the man again, got another nod, and then turned to me. For the first time since the judge started, I really saw Mackenzie. She looked scared and lost, but I couldn't help her now. Kim spoke up clearly. Objection! Your Honor, I believe that Ms. Morrison has been guided in her answers. The objection is accepted, Counselor. I agree. Security. Please escort Mr. Morrison out of this room for the rest of this hearing. Mr. Morrison, if you think I am so unaware that I missed your signals to Ms. Morrison when you thought no one was watching, you are wrong. I am very close to holding you in contempt. You can't do this, the man shouted. That guy needs to pay for ruining my life. I'm not telling my daughter what to say. I'm just helping her say it so everyone knows the truth. Be quiet. The room fell silent. Mr. Morrison, you are now in contempt of court and will remain in custody until we decide whether you have broken your parole from your own case. Security, please remove this man. For the next few moments, everyone watched as security took the man out of the room, shouting angrily and threatening me. It seemed the stress really affected him. The judge called for order. Now, Ms. Morrison, I will ask you again, has Mr. Other ever treated you badly or mistreated you at any time? He asked. Please look at me and no one else as you answer, and feel free to explain if you need to. I saw Mackenzie shiver a bit. Carol looked at me and everyone waited. Finally, Mackenzie spoke, her voice trembling. No, sir. He has never treated me badly. I know he was upset when we left him. I know it hurt him. But he still tried to guide me, even though he was disappointed. He has never been cruel. My father, Stephen, has been really upset with him since we came to live with him. Mom and Stephen keep saying how much better I am now and that Dad would have been mean to me if I stayed in touch with him after the divorce. Tears were running down her face. Kim held my hand tightly, but I was trying hard not to let it affect me. I did feel a bit sorry for her. There might be a small feeling of love for her, but she had done so much to push my feelings away. Since she was my daughter, it hurt more than anything her mom had done to me. Besides, if she learned from her mom, this could just be an act. Mackenzie continued. When Stephen and Dad fought at the hospital and Dad hit Stephen, I was told that Dad had lied, that he went after Stephen and got him fired. I heard over and over that all our money problems were because of Dad. I had no idea. She looked at me even though the judge asked her to look at him. I didn't know that Stephen tried to hurt him, she cried. Daddy, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I really didn't. Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of the exciting stories we have coming up. What do you think about the characters in this story? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.